Fiona Green. Although she had a difficult childhood, since she was the illegitimate daughter of the Count, this girl also owned magic, which ultimately allowed her to become a respected sorceress, a typical cliché for the protagonist. However, Fiona can never become the main character. Father turned to her and asked if she listens to him at all. The girl immediately apologized to her father. Father did not understand at all why she was so impudent rubbish. The eldest son of Count Kane turned to his father and said that he should not worry about such insignificance. Fiona really wanted to smear him in the face. Such a lower creature, as she should remain in place, as if she was not annoyed. Because, although Fiona was 10, she was just an illegitimate child, a burden for the Green family. That's right, now this child is our main character. She became Fiona Green. Although she is an illegitimate child that is in a difficult position, in the future she will become a brilliant sorceress Fiona. Despite this, she cannot say that turning into Fiona is good. And all because even given the bright future, Fiona is not the main character, but the main villain of this story. Even worse, she is the final boss, which should measure from the power of love of the main characters. And she wants to abandon this, she really wants. But what is written on the first? You can't cut down an axe. This story about the Emperor, the main character, and the Holy, and the main character and how they fall in love and save the world. And in this world, there is no mercy for such a villain as Fiona. At the end of Fiona, something reminiscent of Phoenix is transformed in it and threaten the main characters. The Emperor uses the sword to save Fiona from the head, and the beating heart, torn from its owner, pierces. After that, the head of the Fiona was hanged on the gates of the castle, the body was burned in ashes, and the soul of Fiona plunged into darkness, in lifelong eternal suffering. This is what her future looks like in the role of Fiona. Whether it will be better if she dies now incomprehensible, but it is best to concentrate. She can be hit again with a cane if they think that she does not listen. I wanted to say that he is sure that everyone knows that the war is not very good. He also noted that the imperial family ordered the magician to send the magician to the northern line of the front, that is, someone from their family. Until the star hour another 6 years, they are still at the point when the Empire is in a disadvantage due to losses in the fight against monsters. Although this is a story in which the male and female main characters should save the world from evil dragons and monsters, right now, reality fell on Fiona. Father said that one of them should go to the northern line of the front. The guy was simply horrified by the father that they say that they should participate in the war. The girl sighed. The Green family is one of the 7 magicians of the Empire. Therefore, yes, that the palace asks them for granted. The problem is that it is not clear which of them will go to war. It was even interesting whether one of his children wanted to take part in such a glorious feat. He pushed the elder brother. She was hurt, but he just smiled. Here, except her, are the children of the Countess, and probably everyone wants her, the worthless bastard, to go to the war, even if he is just a child who has barely reached the age of 13. Fiona's older brother said that it was simply external. Their younger sister was ready to go. Although it seems she cannot say it loudly, as she is shy. He dragged her hand. The girl tried to say at least something, but this bastard simply continued to smile. Father said that he realized that she wanted to go. It seems that their words coincide. This was probably planned, and the guy said that this is a glorious position that would put up a family in a good light. She should be grateful for the fact that she, a low-grade person, received such an opportunity. Her sister also believed that Kane Dell should become a successor, and she will soon get married, and Jane's third brother will also be engaged to his life. In this regard, she has to go to war. Fiona was angry. He has not even taught her magic since she said that bastard had no right. He always locked her in the attic and erased every day. Although she knows the basics of magic, so everything is not so bad. Fiona tried to say something, but everyone looked at her very closely. That's right. From the very beginning, there was no choice. There is no one on its side. Only one line was dedicated to the disclosure of the past of Fiona, which was not even the main character. Being an illegitimate child, she grew up, receiving only a mockery of the family. The brothers said that it was time to leave. Even if she destroys her family, it will still fall into the same. So it is better to leave herself if she should do it. Father said that she made the right choice, and he is proud of her. She finally behaves like his child. It was suspicious of us, their parties, to invite her to the family assembly when they did not consider her for a person and hold her locked up in the attic. Fiona did not feel the same when for the first time, a year ago, she found out that she was in this body. It cannot believe that Fiona, the main villain, who is in the same position as she, felt the same. Fiona was offended by the whole world because she never received love, and in the end, she was in a swamp because of an irreversible choice. But unlike her, the main character is not going to be offended by anyone, all due to the fact that this world, which was written by her, the northern line of the front Halon. When Fiona arrived there, now she knew what the castle of the Duke of Halon looked like. But when she arrived, she felt very strong pressure. In the end, her family forced her to come to the northern front line, controlled by a ruthless duke. Just looking at him, it became clear that he was the one who could live in the castle of the King of Demons. And Fiona dug her grave, having come here. She was led to huge doors, and the master asked the servants to open them. The door was so big that the girl was just delighted. She was shocked when the door opened, and there she saw a man with silver hair. It was the Duke of the North, Halon. He heard that the brilliant magician would come. Let's show support. But he does not understand what kind of skinny child is standing in front of him. Halon. In the future, he will become a mentor of Sigrin, the protagonist. Like the one who supports the hero, he was a rather popular character in readers. If trouble happens, then he will help the head hero. Despite the fact that now he is much younger than when he appeared in the original story, Fiona would dare to say that he was still a rather wild character. She introduced herself, and then the gentleman asked Giron. "Well, hear it all," Giron said, because Count Green said that he would send the great magician his blood. The Duke, with a cry, asked if he wanted to say that he sent this trifle instead of himself. The Duke realized that this stupid bastard thinks about them. When this damn important war will end, first of all, he will force Green's family to pay for it. Then the girl Fiona realized that they were definitely the end. The ruthless Count of the North is very angry. Well, you should not think so at all. She now has more serious problems than the Green family. She already really wanted the Duke, along with his services. They stopped looking at her like that. When the Duke became, she was very scared. She looked at him all in bewilderment. The Duke came closer and asked her to listen carefully to him. He asked for an explanation why Count Green sent a child like her. He cannot believe that the Green family has no more talents. The first brother of the family, the sister will soon get married, and her second brother will be engaged. Therefore, she, the youngest child, was sent here instead of them. The Duke sighed and realized that these idiots really are frivolous to the war. He does not understand more or less, but still this is not respect for him. She must have already decided. But they don't need children here. Therefore, she should return home, and this was the ultimate decision of the Duke. He said that he did not have time for useless people. She does not know what about Abel, but she has no place where she could return. In the original novel, Fiona did not know about her magical abilities and was expelled from the estate Green and Halon. Early, from the fact that the world threw it into the trash, caused the formation of Fiona as a villain. Well then, I know the current Fiona about everything in advance. This body has extraordinary abilities, so she decided to install the Duke. She said that she really has something to say. She said that this order could not fulfill. The magicians are everywhere good, instead of being on the street. It is better to prove their abilities by laying the foundation of the relationship. And in any case, the situation will begin to change after that, as the main character will appear in the war. If it lasts until this time and collects enough money, then it will be able to avoid a mark of death and move in rural areas. The girl said that she did not want to return at all, but she would not stubbornly ask him to leave her. Therefore, Fiona decided to ask him one chance to prove her value. He was a little asked, and then believed that she was going to take on cleaning. But she said that this is not at all like that, and she asks for permission only once to go on the battlefield, as I can, and she will show what could be useful in this war. The Duke was very surprised by the decisiveness of Fiona. Fiona did not quite understand that with the atmosphere and why silence reigns. She did not understand why she believed that he was thinking that she was just some nonsense and she was a brazen child. But she hoped to the end that he would not tell her like that. After a rather long silence, the Duke still approached her. Abel decided to agree to this adventure. This is the funny thing that he has heard lately. This child has good jokes. But Fiona did not understand what he was talking about, because she is actually serious. Abel said he agreed and he would give her one chance. She can go forward and prove her value. Duran said that he had already returned. Abel decided to ask a question about that child from Greens County. Duran said that he had taken the girl into the room. The Duke smiled and said that her impudence and self-confidence were simply indescribable. She says she will be useful, but the Duke is also interested in what Duran thinks about it. The guy said that, compared to peers, she is very straightforward. When they came to her room, Fiona immediately said that she was different from the attic. But in the end, she is still a child. And they were surprised that the Count really sent her to fight. The Duke said that 2 days later, he would send her to the second wall. Duran was just horrified. The second wall is full of demons, and this is a very dangerous place. But the Duke told him not to worry, because Abel intends to go with her. The guy was surprised, and the master said that he would really go. But if she is useless, then he will personally feed her demons. Fiona fell on the sofa and inhaled easily. Honestly, the pressure was Nifiga. Fiona is afraid of the guy whom she created. It was really sorry. The main character is not entirely sure that to think about the war, so she decided to postpone everything later. It was so tiring today. Fiona has no more strength. When they went on a carriage, the Duke drove up and turned to Fiona. Abel noticed that it was time for her to confirm her words. This is how he spoke. Although he is the character created by the main character, appearance is the only thing that is in him. Fiona simply said she understood him, and Abel with a smile asked if she was scared. Fiona lowered her head and said that there was nothing to be afraid of. Honestly, Fiona cannot be calm. She is the one who once lived in the 21st century will now fight the demons. However, she has no choice if we take into account the future of Fiona. The Duke said that he would not protect her. This means that she can die. But Fiona simply said that this is not a problem, all due to the fact that she is not afraid of death. The worst thing for her is the future without hopes and dreams. It doesn't matter how she will die later, it will be better than suffering. But she does not understand why she had to get into the body of Fiona. The second wall was reported that the demons were attacked. All battalions were ordered to take positions. Fiona believed that it was just a joke, but Abel smiled and said that by chance they arrived at the right time. Therefore, she must go and prove her significance. In such a situation, she should impress and give a full one. But Fiona did not understand at all how to do this, because the demons were already approaching. Fiona said that she would rise to the fortress shaft. Since it is here for the first time, she needs to understand how the battlefield looks. Although she read about it, seeing the battle with her own eyes is completely different. But she was just in shock when she saw everything with her own eyes. The Duke asked what her first impression of the battlefield was. She heard people's cries that they need to be burned, so they could not regenerate. It's horrible. Fiona believed that she herself was terrible. Since she created this scene, she really did not want everything to be so. The Duke believed that she was so afraid that she could not budge. He also noted that if she realized that the arrival was a mistake, then she could return. But she refused, because she decided that since she created this chaos, she should be responsible for it. Therefore, she shouted that everything would begin now. The criteria for which the level of the magician is determined, the number of mana he has, how large scale phenomenon he can create, and finally, its effectiveness. She feels a weak stream of mana. For the first time, he uses such a strong magic in the body of Fiona. The only thing she can now believe is her crazy talent. The Duke noticed a thunderstorm, and also noticed that it seems to be slightly different. The fact that she wants to create is quite difficult. But it turned out because she finally exhaled. Abel smiled and noticed that it was amazing. But suddenly she noticed something strange. The Duke noticed that it was like divine punishment. He first sees a magician with 2 skills, and he is not sure that she is really a child. But the girl confirmed this. But she will become the final boss in the future. The Duke was sure that a child is fundamentally. It seems that everything will collapse if he takes at least another step. She did not want to believe that he was going to leave her, because this was not enough. But he said that she simply looked that the demons were retreating. The girl was in shock and noticed that these demons really retreated. It feels like she first reached something since she got into this world. But suddenly she sighed. She feels for some reason the townspeople look at her. She was even a little embarrassed when she saw so many views on herself. She smiled. She was awkwardly doing it when she was held in her arms. Everyone began to shout that she was a wonderful magician and were delighted. They already began to thank this girl, because of which Fiona smiled. She hoped that she managed and turned to the Duke with a smile. Then, he also smiled in response and lowered her to the floor, after which Abel greeted her in Halon because she was accepted. He recognized her, so she began to smile and say that it was really an honor for her. He just called her Fiona. He called her by name. As she thought, he called her a child or even a baby, although he knew her name. But she will show him, a month later, the whole servant was just delighted with Madame Fiona. They constantly prepared a lot of sweets for her, and the girl was also delighted. She is known to the servants as a brilliant lady young magician. It seems that the episode when she caused a zipper in the castle made a deep impression, and the opportunity, from this, that there are no more children in this place. They all take care of Fiona so beautifully. Even Abel says that she is too small for 10 years, so they order to feed and bring the girl to normal. This was a special order that he gave. Thanks to this, her pockets are filled with delicious ones, and she is very happy. Suddenly, she noticed Geron. She was surprised when she saw. Judging by the fact that he looked like a zombie, he had just patted Abel. She turned to him and said that she has a candy for him. The guy smiled and thanked her, and she also asked where he was going. Geron replied that he was going to the 4th fortress wall. He heard that they suddenly attacked these in the morning. The demons stubbornly attack the day and night. We can say that the situation on the 2nd wall, for which she is responsible, has slightly improved, to other places quite weakly. Just think that this was repeated for 6 long years until the main plot began. Since the situation is still uncertain, Fiona said that she would go with him. The guy was very surprised that she was going to go with him. He was not sure that she would cope with this, but the girl said that there would be no problems. Geron. I remember the case when she was scared, when she saw the corpse of the demon. The difference between the gaze with the fortress wall and the view nearby was too much, so she was frightened. After that, she always walked with Abel. Geron said he could then hold this, and not from the Duke. Because for some reason about he hates when someone is going with her. But this is excellent, and they can already go. The 4th fortress wall looked just awful. The commander critically lacked people. This is just some kind of curse. It is incomprehensible. When reinforcements arrive, that Lady Fiona from the Green family is already on the way here. When they arrived, the man has already prepared a whole report. He said that they are currently engaged in the calculation of the victims of today's attack. Geron asked how its scale of damage, in order to somehow understand the whole picture. The girl, meanwhile, looked and saw. Sparks flew in all directions. The smell of burning flesh permeated the air. Now she was somehow used to this terrible stage. They were also provided with all the tools that they missed at all. From this situation, Fiona cannot calmly stay close to Geron. Everyone was in shock when they saw that the magician went somewhere. She said she wanted to burn the corpses. First, she needs to concentrate and feel the stream of mana. She said that she would take care of this area, so do not worry. They burned the corpses of demons, burned and burned a bit. Fiona did not understand at all why there are so many of them. They have no end of the region. She decided to see, then she needed to burn the following demons. There she saw a boy who lay with the corpses of demons. She believed that he was about her age. Judging by his clothes, he is not a soldier. Maybe he is just a mercenary. She has an adult mind in the child's body. Therefore, it does not matter much if she dies. But for this guy, everything would be different. Well, suddenly, he began to breathe, and she was scared. She was that he is a zombie. Even corpses can speak here. This is really some kind of fantasy to me, so she was frightened because of this. But she said that I understand that this child is still, so she could free herself. She began to scream that they had a survivor. He had a wound near the abdomen. She decided that it was better to turn him over, so that he would not be so painful. When she turned it over, he looked a little better. And he opened his eyes, which means he has consciousness. She asked if he was listening to her. Now they are safe, so do not worry. She asked him not to turn off, but the guy just asked Bunny who she was. It will begin, and this is already an achievement. He has consciousness. Then he has a chance to survive if she immediately takes him to the doctor. But if you look closely, this guy has an attractive face. He would be beautiful if he were healthy. But what he is doing here is completely incomprehensible. Besides, despite the fact that he had never seen him before with her familiar, The guy suddenly noticed that a huge shadow appeared right behind the girl. His gaze froze on a monster with terrible claws and burning eyes. In horror, he felt his heart sank with fear. He immediately shouted that it was very dangerous, but his voice mixed with a panic noise of the crowd. Men, seeing the monster, began to scream, ordering people to escape immediately. Fiona did not immediately realize what happened, and only after a moment she felt stressful glances around. Only then did she slowly turn her head, trying to understand what was so scared by everyone. But, before she could consider what was happening, she was grabbed by the hand. Someone's strong but trembling palm sharply pulled her back, saving from inevitable trouble. It was the same boy she saw before. He looked wounded, but by some miracle, he found the strength to protect her. Such an act was unexpected and simply amazing. People immediately ran up to Fiona. They asked with concern whether she was injured, but at that time, they tried to at least somehow stop the monster, threatening everyone around. Someone warned her that it was necessary to be prepared. The giant who was not caught clearly chose her with his goal. He was breathing heavily, hanging over her, ready to strike. If the boy had not had time to push her aside, she would already lay lifeless in this very place. The thought of this made her heart freeze with horror. She thought for a moment that the boy was dead, but when she looked at him more attentively, she noticed that he was still breathing. He was alive, although he was seriously wounded. Fiona did not know what to do. Apparently, his injury became even worse after he awkwardly rolled into his hand. Each of his movement caused her fear. She could not just take and run away while he was lying here. But the giant had already raised his hand for a new blow, and she understood that she could not dodge this position. The monster was preparing again. The men who watched this looked in horror, because they understood that this time the blows would be fatal. The giant moved purposefully, as if his only goal was Fiona and this boy. He seemed to not notice anyone else around. People shouted, urging her to do something. Everyone knew that the lady owns magic, and now it was their only chance to stop the beast. Then, having gathered all her strength, Fiona decided to apply magic. She was scared, but there was simply no other way out. She had to at least try to push him away. Her spell worked. The giant recoiled and then collapsed. He did not move anymore. He was over, and tense silence reigned on the battlefield. Fiona knew that such an amount of magic used could harm her, but so far it did not matter. The main thing is that they remained alive. In comparison with the monster, she was in order. Yes, the forces were running out, but at least she did not lose consciousness, and this was already good. People surrounded her again. Their faces were filled with anxiety. They asked how she feels. Fiona smiled weakly and replied that she was already better. Suddenly, the boy went limp in her hands, losing consciousness. Fiona looked at his face in dismay, and at that moment, she seemed to be dawned on her. She realized who he was. Details surfaced in his head. His clothes were not like the mercenaries, but his hair was dark like a night sky. Something in this combination made her think. Birjuzovo gray eyes, expressive features of the face, which stood out even through dirt and blood. At first, she did not recognize him. He looked younger than expected. But now there is no doubt. This guy is the same Sigrin, the main character, before the events of the original story. Another 6 years. And Fiona cannot understand why this boy lies right in front of her, wounded and helpless, as if fate decided to speed up events. This is the very moment when he first met Abel. But now is not the time to think about it. There are more important things than plunging into the thoughts of the future. If he is really the same hero who is destined to save this world, then his death can now mean its end. So, it will be the one who has gained everyone to death. Understanding all the seriousness of the situation, Fiona does not lose a second and begins to scream, demanding that someone urgently call the doctor. It has not yet been too late. 2 days passed, and the boy finally came to his senses. He is still weak, but can already lie in bed and not balance between life and death. Although his injuries were serious, fortunately, the worst was avoided. The crisis has passed, and now it remains only to wait for its complete recovery. The doctor examined the patient and confidently stated that now his condition is stable. These words delighted Fiona, and she felt incredible relief. The doctor also warned that if something happened suddenly, he would need to be called immediately. Fiona promised that she would do so and said goodbye to him. She was overwhelmed with joy and relief. All this time she was afraid that the irreparable would happen, but now she could breathe calmly. After all, according to predictions, they have just prevented the end of the world. And this, no doubt, is a very good result. Although, if you think about it, they are unlikely to praise it, if it turns out that this boy is really a hero. Her role in history looks suspicious. Now Sigrina is about 14 years old. At least that should be taken into account, how the events in the original plot are going on. The book of his background is not completely described, but Fiona thought out the main details well to better understand who she was dealing with. Like most of the main characters, its origin is shrouded in mystery. He is a prince of the same empire in which she is now. True, its origin is unofficial. In fact, he is an illegitimate child, whom they prefer not to talk about. His mother was a commoner, and she was despised. She was subjected to constant humiliation, as if her existence was a mistake. Many people hated Sigrin, considering him superfluous in this world. They wished him death and dreamed of getting rid of him forever. Since childhood, he lived in constant danger. Every day he could become the last for him, and he knew about it the best. His mother understood that they could not survive here. For the sake of his salvation, she decided to escape to another country, hoping to find protection there. But they were searched too carefully. A woman with a child hiding from everyone was like targets. They could not just let them go. Mother, with trembling hands, hid her son in a secluded place, whispering some words in his ear. But the boy was too small to understand what she was talking about. Anxiety was heard in her voice, but he could not realize how serious everything was. She smiled, although her eyes shone with tears. She stroked her son on the head and said that everything would be fine with her. They will certainly meet later. In the end, she tightly pressed him to her, as if trying to convey all her love in one last embrace. But the promise turned out to be a lie. She could not escape. Fate was merciless. She was overtaken, and she died, leaving her son alone in this cruel world. However, those who hunted her did not stop. They knew that she had a son, and now they were looking for him. After all, if the mother tried to escape, then the boy should be somewhere nearby, hiding from the pursuers. When he finally got out of the shelter, his gaze froze on the almost lifeless body of his mother. In a weak voice, she told him to run as far as possible, without looking back. These were her last words, full of despair and love. He sobbed, trying to wake her, but everything was in vain. In an instant, he was left completely alone. Young, helpless, broken. The world, which was already cruel, has now taken everything that was expensive from him. Without seeing another way out, the boy gathered the remnants of his strength and went to Halon, the cold lands of the distant north, hoping that no one would find him there. This choice was not accidental. Halon was on the edge of the empire. Those who wanted his death could not get there. It was the only place where he could hide from the past, and, possibly, start life again. Later, Abel learns about his fate. He will notice that Sigrin owns a sword and decides to take it as a student. Thus, the story of the boy's childhood will end, about those trials that hardened his soul and made what he became. At the same time, a short story that he told the main character will end at the same time. After all, the past is just the foundation on which the person is built, what forms us, but does not determine completely. Moreover, its history is not just a part of the fantasy world. This is a real tragedy that once happened to a living person. He survived, but the price was too high. He went through suffering, loss, betrayal. All this left scars not only on his body, but also in the heart, making it what he is now. The main character is really sorry for him. Although she thought that one day she would leave this place, at that moment she felt different. But even if she decides to leave, now she needs to treat him with respect. In the end, in the future, it will become who will deprive her of life. Fiona decided that just in case, you need to make friends with the boy. She knew that her sister would sincerely take care of him, which means that he should grow up with a good person. Although in fact, she just wanted him not to touch her. She was so worried about Sigrin that she almost did not sleep. and now fatigue covered her with her head. Therefore, she decided to rest a little. He will close his eyes only for a minute next to him, and he will think about everything else later when he finally comes to his senses. But suddenly, Fiona woke up. My heart pounded in my chest, and a wave of anxiety ran through my body. Something woke her, and she did not understand what exactly. She tried to remember how much time passed since she dozed off, but nothing occurred to her head. Her thoughts were confused. Feeling someone's gaze, she slowly turned her head. Something was strange, but she did not immediately realize what exactly. Sigrin did not sleep. He just looked at her, and then asked if she was sleeping well. So they met, although the situation was a little awkward. Fiona was amazed. When he opened his eyes, his beauty struck her. These dark, deep eyes went to him, giving the appearance a certain mystery, perhaps because of his age, but he reminded her of an angry cat. Something in his gaze was tense, prickly, as if he was not used to trusting people. She thought he would be more calm, because he is the main character of this story. But in fact, his alertness was striking. He was silent for some time, and then finally asked the first question. The voice was quiet, but hard. He wanted to know where he was. Fiona calmly replied that he was in the Halon castle. After that, the guy, frowning, asked who she was. The girl, without hesitation, introduced herself. In response, he also called his name. His voice sounded even, but his gaze remained wary. He tried to figure out how he was alive at all. There was empty in memory, not a single memoirs of how he fell down with her. He only knew that he woke up here, but what happened between these moments remained a mystery. Even in an unconscious state, he managed to help her. A real hero always puts others higher than himself, even if he does not realize this. And Fiona is not the first time noticed that he is. She calmly explained that she herself brought him here and asked the doctor to take care of him. The guy looked stunned. He stared incredulously at her and asked, as if he could not believe in what he heard. He could make a displeased face as much as he wanted, but she was worried about another condition. Yes, he looks like the main character of this story himself, but in the end, he is just a child, even trying to seem stronger. Her expectations and reality dispersed too much. The fact that he survived is not just a difficult past, is a terrible, real experience. Feeling guilt covers her with her head, because now she sees the consequences with her own eyes. Why did the main character have to suffer so much? She could not understand this, but, having discarded all the emotions, she asked, "Does he have temperature?" It was important for her to know that everything was in order with him. In response, the guy abruptly pulled out his hand and said hard that she should not touch him when she pleases. An irritation was in his voice, and his gaze was dissatisfied. Fiona did not retreat and asked to honestly say if he had pain, but he only coldly replied that he would take care of himself, and not suffering, ordered her to leave. She touched him again. The guy flashed with rage, his voice became louder, almost broke into a scream. He was angry, but his anger seemed something more than just irritation. No matter how he tried to hold on, the 14-year-old child remains a child. Everyone has the limit of opportunities, even one who wants to look unshakable. The guy in horror looked at the woman in front of him, not understanding what was happening. The voice trembled with fear when he asked who she was and what all this means. Fiona calmly replied that he was in intensive treatment, and if something hurts or gets worse, he must immediately inform her of this. However, the young man was confused. Why should she even worry about him if they had just met? All this seemed ridiculous and suspicious to him. In addition, he noticed that the situation was extremely strange. But Fiona only reminded him that it was he who saved her, and therefore now she cares about him. Sigrin asked dumbfounded that she was carrying, assuring that she would never do this. He did not understand what kind of salvation we were talking about. At that moment, the door suddenly swung open, and a tall man entered the room. The conversation immediately broke off. The tension hung in the air. Sigrin froze with shock, not knowing who in front of him. Fiona also looked surprised, obviously not expecting the appearance of an uninvited guest. Abel, with irritation, threw Fiona that she was still early to bring men home, especially when there is a child in the house. Fiona immediately objected that in front of him was not a man, but just a boy. However, the Duke only grinned, believing that this is one and the same. He was clearly in a bad mood, so Fiona decided not to argue and not aggravate the situation, trying to smooth out the tension. She asked what brought him here, but the Duke only abandoned in irritation that this boy called him the outburst of the outbreak. In his words, a clear hint sounded that the appearance of this child somehow changed the balance in the house, as if violating his usual order. Fiona raised her eyebrows in surprise, realizing that he was hinting at her. However, despite the discontent of the Duke, she firmly stated that the boy would remain in her room because his wounds were serious. The Duke Halon carefully looked at the boy whom he saw for the first time. His clothes and manners gave out a stranger. He was clearly not local, and the Duke decided to find out where he was from. The words of the Duke made Fiona think. Indeed, she never asked Sigrin who he was working for. It just did not occur to her. But the boy himself answered without hesitation. He belonged to the detachment of the mercenaries of Karl, and, judging by his tone, did not see anything strange in this. The Duke frowned. He asked, surprised that Karl sank before hiring such children. Are the things in the mercenaries are so bad that they need teenagers? But it was a question that could not be discussed openly. Fiona only smiled, pretending that this conversation does not concern her. Sigrin did not answer. Silence hung between them, and for some time, no one said a word. The atmosphere was becoming more tense. Then Fiona decided to dispel tension. She went to Sigrin and quietly said that in front of him, the Duke Abel Halon himself was facing. Hearing this name, Sigrin was wary. He knew who the Duke was, and the first thought that he had come to his mind. Perhaps he would want to kill him. The girl reached for him, but he sharply recoiled, as if her touch burned. He left the hospital and ordered her not to do this anymore. However, Fiona only shrugged. She did not try to harm him. She just asked him not to worry. Fiona seemed so carried away by this boy that even her perseverance looked funny. She obviously was not going to retreat, and even her stubbornness seemed like acute rather than annoying. The Duke, frowning, ordered the girl to stay away from this child. In his opinion, it's too early to think about such things. But Fiona was not going to give up so easily, and repeated again that this guy was just a child. Not wanting to continue this dispute, the Duke simply grabbed her in his arms and confidently headed. Recently, he increasingly wore her as if it had become familiar to him. The maids watched them with admiration. In their opinion, they looked like a father with a daughter. Fiona was already used to hearing such remarks, because the Duke raised her in his arms so often that it ceased to surprise her. They both were owners of silver hair, so others involuntarily found similarities in them. Fiona suddenly remembered the boy and asked if he could stay here until a complete recovery. The Duke was surprised to note that the girl for the first time asks for something like that. It was so unexpected that he even thought for a moment. Fiona honestly admitted that she rarely happens something, but this time was an exception. The Duke reluctantly agreed, although he did not like the request. However, he will allocate a room to the boy so that he can calmly get better. She literally glowed with joy. But the Duke suddenly looked at her intently and specified whether she really wants to be with this stranger under one roof. Sigrin only frowned and with a grin asked what was wrong with her. He did not understand why this wealthy young lady so stubbornly intervenes in his fate. Although they only met, he already felt hostility towards her. Something in her annoyed him, but he himself could not say exactly what exactly. Fiona, of course, did not grow into luxury, but she did not see the meaning to explain this to Sigrin. All he needed now was just to get better and grow strong. The rest did not matter. Over time, he will have to not only attach himself to the main character, but also really fall in love with her. His feelings will become not only his personal history, but also part of the salvation of this world. Fiona, as a loving mother, will watch it with warmth and care. She is always there. Her attention does not weaken, even when her own affairs require time and effort. In any case, she feels gratitude to the Duke, because without him, much could have developed differently. Therefore, Fiona decides to work even more diligent, not wanting to be a burden. The Duke seemed to be the same as before, restrained, a little harsh, but still something new, softness, which was previously hidden, appeared in his words. This embarrassed her, because she did not know whether it was a kind of kindness or just a change in mood. But most of all, she wanted to believe that he would not drive her away. The Duke noticed her anxiety and asked what she was thinking about, but Fiona only sighed. People are really very complicated, and understanding their intentions is not easy. The boy, lying in his bed, recalled the words of his mother. She always told him that he should survive, no matter what happened, and these words were deeply populated in his memory. Kalia, his dear mother, was worried about him until the very end. Even in her last days, she only thought that he was alive. When she was dying, her voice was weak, but she still managed to tell him that he had to live. And even then, she found the strength to touch him. These words crashed into his consciousness, like a stigma. He could not forget how he was sitting nearby, feeling her life left, but unable to change anything. He later found himself in the place where he was safe. He knew that this was the fulfillment of his mother's last desire, but the void in the heart did not decrease from this. Now that nothing threatened his life, he did not have to think about survival. But awareness of this did not bring relief, only the severity of memories. He was allowed to do the simplest work in the detachment of mercenaries, to sweep the floors, wear water, clean dishes. It was humiliating, but at least it did not allow to die. Once, one of the mercenaries shouted to him, but he could not immediately approach because he was finishing washing the floor. He knew that they could punish the slowness, but still did not throw a rag. The man who called him grinned in irritation and called him a puppy. He said that his words should not be an empty sound for someone who eats their bread and lives under their roof. Then he grabbed the guy by the neck and jerked sharply, forcing him to look into his eyes. He recalled that if not for them, he would have died a long time ago, which means he was obliged to obey. After that, the man rudely pushed him to the floor and warned him not to stand in his way. There was no anger in his voice, only fatigue, as if he was talking about unnecessary garbage. Mercenaries often beat him for no reason. Maybe out of boredom, maybe just to show who is the main one here. Soon his body was covered with bruises and scars, but despite everything, he did not give up. He had to survive. Mom also asked him when she left. Her voice still sounded in her head, preventing him from giving up. However, I constantly heard that he is useless, worthless, not suitable for anything. These words sounded even more often than his name, crashing into consciousness like a stigma. And once he thought, why should he survive at all? Since no one needs him, maybe it would be easier to just disappear? He felt loneliness, often dreaming that someone showed at least a drop of care to him, but this was not in his life. He felt how his existence loses all meaning. From time to time, he wondered if at least some value his insignificant existence has at least some value, whether it is worth it to fight for him. Feelings of helplessness did not leave him. Over time, mercenaries became the main source of promotions of Halon's possessions. Fights with monsters, although they were dangerous, brought good money, giving the opportunity to survive. He did not get a good weapon, and therefore he was forced to use a sword that he accidentally picked up on the battlefield. Outwardly, this was strange, but there was no other way out. However, the only positive point in these battles was that every time, risking his life, he became stronger, developing his skills in battle. He survived, but life, as it turned out, was not so simple. Everything went not as smoothly as he imagined, and he had to deal with new difficulties. At some point, they were forced to retreat, as the enemy was too strong. The situation became more and more dangerous, and they had to look for ways for salvation. One of the men shouted to leave, calling him a break, and forced him to run. These were words full of anger, but he could not do anything in response. The same man pushed him, saying that if he cannot be useful, then let him die. This attitude hurt painfully, but he understood that it was only the beginning. He was offered to become a living shield, and although it was humiliating, he knew that there was no other way out. They left him, thinking that everything would be in order with him, but he was not sure. The words of his mother suddenly surfaced in his head, which always told him that he should live, no matter what. These words became his support in moments when everything seemed hopeless. When the monsters began to attack him, he was in a state of shock. Everything that was happening seemed unreal, and he did not know how to cope with such a situation. He could not stop, could not afford to give up, although he realized that, despite the improvement of his military skills, this was not enough to survive. He raised his weapon, preparing for the last battle, and thought that perhaps death is what was waiting for him. In a sense, it even reassured him. He could not help but think that of all the reasons why he was destined to die, this was the most unfair. The people who betrayed him caused his fear and pain. If he was destined to die for someone, he sincerely hoped that it would be for the person who would deserve such a victim, for a person who himself would be the same as him. He longed to save someone he could support. Since no one gave him a helping hand at the moment when he was most necessary, this left deep traces in his soul. And that is why he so wanted to help someone, not demanding anything in return. His ideal was that others, perhaps, lived better than he managed to do this, so that everything is not in vain. He felt everything was leaving. He understood that it was precisely such thoughts that lead to his death, but he was ready for this. The only thing he wanted was that his hope was not in vain. He believed that somewhere there, in this world, there is light that could illuminate the path. Or, perhaps, he himself will become this light for someone who wants to believe in the best. Now it was impossible. He was too weakened to even hope for some miracle. However, the thought of a bright future did not leave him, leaving a mark on his soul. Suddenly, as if from the darkness itself, someone began to gently stroke his hair. It was so unexpected and warm that he felt his heart beat a little stronger. This touch was so careful that his eyes were filled with tears. He closed his eyes, trying to get rid of the pain and experiences that tormented his soul. He did not understand where he was. Everything seemed vague and strange. But when his gaze fell on the girl nearby, everything began to seem less important. She was nearby, and it calmed down. He was shocked when he saw an unfamiliar girl. He could not understand how she ended up here, but her presence at some point gave him a feeling of peace, which he did not know for so long. It was an amazingly pacifying sight that he saw in his life. All his tired days and experiences for a moment disappeared, leaving only the silence and feeling of peace from this girl. Fiona asked how he was doing with the wound and offered to examine her, but he hastily removed his hand, not wanting her to touch him. He did not want her concern. He repeated again that she did not want her to touch him when she wanted. He already talked about this, and his words have not changed. She could not understand his perseverance. All she could do was just try to call. But is it really so difficult to understand what was unpleasant for him to be in the spotlight? She barely managed to record his name. There was no question of rapprochement. If he hurts, then let him tell the doctor. But he did not want her to look at his pain. Fiona noticed that he should understand when he had to seek help. But the boy said that she was too strange in her behavior. The girl was dumbfounded and asked why he perceives her like that. He looked at her as something strange that she could not understand. His words puzzled her. He asked why she cares so much about him. This is sympathy from a girl who has not encountered real problems of life. Why is she reacting like that? He even joked that, perhaps, for her, he is like an abandoned dog or cat, which needs to be taken care of. He could not understand her mercy, but the girl did not agree with this. She stated that this was not so, that her concern has nothing to do with pity. Sigrin seemed to think that she was close to Abel. This meant that he saw in her a noble and protected line, the one that did not know a harsh life. And it was this that angered him. He did not want to depend on such a girl. She noticed that she had no such low intentions, but the guy, in turn, could not understand why she was behaving that way, if not so. Of course, she believed that close relations with him could be useful in the future, but this was only one side of her motives. However, much more important for her was her attachment to the man, whose name was Sigrin. Something touched his presence in her soul, and she could not ignore it. The difficulty was that she could not just act because she wanted to help him. There was something more that haunted. He noticed that to save the person whom he had just met, for no reason, is a little strange. He did not understand what stood behind her act. She replied that perhaps he had such thoughts, but the guy sharply said that this was not so at all, and silence again hung between them. He was sure that only people like her, rich and spoiled, can live with such naive thoughts, not understanding the difficulties of life. He began to annoy her. She, too, was not just a lady sitting aside. She participated in the battle and now asked him to listen to her. She was not just another lady who remains aside. She had her own strength, her opinion, and she was ready to fight for her views. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and when she opened, she saw the doctor. The mistress was very glad that he came, and that her anxiety did not remain without attention. And today, there was Lady Fiona here, which surprised him. As expected, she finished perfectly with others, especially with peers, with whom she quickly found a common language. When the doctor decided to examine the guy, Sigrin said that she could go, because this did not require her presence, but she was not up to that. But Fiona replied that she would like to see how his wounds healed. The guy, with obvious discontent, said that she was very lucky if she does not faint from one species. The girl easily noticed that she would try not to worry. She saw a lot of terrible corpses on the battlefield, so for her, it was no worse than sweet sweets. The guy, in turn, noted that he would just like her to leave. He could not calmly make a dressing if she continued to stay nearby. The girl still said that she would leave. She added that he, in principle, was at the age when everyone is shy to undress in front of others, especially to women. Although, to be honest, if you think about it, this shyness could be some kind of cute feature that spoke of his age and awkwardness in such situations. Deciding that she would return later, she smiled and took a step back. It seemed to her a reasonable decision so as not to interfere with him, but not to forget about the situation. The doctor, moving on to an important issue, asked Sigrin whether he felt pain that night. This was an important point to understand how it was restored. The guy calmly replied that there was no pain. Everything was in order, and he felt pretty well, despite the recent events and injuries. Fiona could not even think that a simple ligation of the wound would be such a long and tedious process. She tried to act carefully, but the blood did not want to stop, and the bandages were striving to unwind all the time. But Sigrin, unable to stand it, suddenly shouted that she was just an ignorant girl who did not know anything about real life. His words were full of anger, but Fiona was not going to interrupt this conversation, even if the contradictions broke her soul. She also works, also tries with all her might, so she is completely incomprehensible, where Sigrin has such a fierce hostility to her. She did nothing bad to him, but for some reason he treats her as with a sworn enemy. Until that moment, she never thought about what kind of child Sigrin was. Perhaps in his past, there is something that would explain his behavior now. But she does not know these details, and that is why she cannot understand him. In the original story, which she knew, the main role belonged to Eunice. Sigrin was a secondary character. His image existed only in the shadow of the main character, without depth and complex feelings. He was an ideal man, a caring, beautiful, and boundlessly devoted Eunice. So he saw the whole world, the embodiment of a dream, to those whom every girl would like to see next to her, those who always remained faithful to their lover and supported her in any situation. Fiona was used to thinking about Sigrin just like that, but now that in front of her was a completely different person, she did not know how to relate to him. Perhaps she herself does not fully realize that she drives her actions. At heart, conflicting feelings are fighting, the fault for past mistakes, a strange attachment to him, and the voice of the mind, suggesting that this boy can play an important role in her life. But he seems to perceive her behavior as something superfluous. If she does something rash, it can cause him hatred, which means that her own future will be at risk. She cannot make such an error. At that moment, the doctor came to her. He immediately turned to the lady, and Fiona decided that the inspection was already over. The doctor confirmed her guess, but his expression remained too serious. This made the girl be alert. What if something bad happened? However, the doctor assured her that the wounds of the boy heal. Despite this, she did not leave a feeling of anxiety, as if the doctor was not saying something. He added that this child was once a mercenary, and now in question whether they could let him return to their former life, even after a complete recovery. The boy did not say anything about himself, but his body spoke for him. It was completely covered with old scars testifying to a difficult fate. Without listening to the doctor to the end, Fiona literally flew into the room where the wounded lay, unable to restrain her emotions anymore. In a fit of feelings, she screamed, turning to him. She could not believe in what she heard. It never occurred to her that everything would be so bad. Now she did not understand what she had done. But what suddenly found on him? An awkward silence hung in the room. The girl came closer and sat next to him on the bed. However, the boy was clearly not enthusiastic about such proximity. Fiona quietly apologized. Her voice trembled. She carefully touched his shoulder and warned that she was going to raise his clothes a little to look. Sigrin froze with horror. His gaze rushed around the room, as if he was looking for a way out. He sharply asked her to stop, but the girl continued to apologize. In a panic, he began to scream louder, demanding that she stop, if he already understands that this is wrong. But Fiona stubbornly replied that she needed only a minute. Under her fingers, the skin was uneven, covered with hillocks and cavities. She could not believe her eyes. The surface of the body was dotted with traces. These were real scars. When she raised his shirt above, a picture appeared in front of her, from which her breath caught her. It was terrible. They covered his body with a continuous pattern, as if an invisible artist painted the skin with pain. Fiona could not understand how this could happen. Sigrin's face was distorted from rage. He shouted that he would no longer tolerate this, and in a fit of irritation, sharply pushed her from himself. Fiona did not have time to react. She collapsed right onto the cold floor, painfully hitting her back. The air with a whistle escaped from her lungs. He immediately realized that he had pushed her too much. Fear flashed in his eyes. He did not want this. He stepped towards her, but froze. Watching how she rises heavily, he asked for confusion, whether she was made of feathers, since she fell so easily from his movement. Fiona, without saying a word, just stepped back. Sigrin could not understand why she was so fragile, so light, as if she could be blown away with one sigh. Sigrin noticed how Fiona's eyes filled with tears, and she began to sob quietly. He did not expect such a reaction, and immediately felt anxiety. In a panic, he rushed to her, worried about her face. He bombarded her with questions, trying to understand if she was hurt, whether someone had a pain. Seeing how she continues to cry, he felt helpless. He begged her to speak with him, explain the reason for tears. If only she stopped crying so much. He nervously asked where exactly she had. He suggested that perhaps she hit her shoulder or injured her leg, and she so badly. Without waiting for a clear answer, he came to the conclusion that a doctor urgently needed. He stated that it was impossible. They should immediately call the doctor. But Fiona suddenly grabbed him by the shirt, preventing him from leaving. He froze, not understanding what she wants to say with this and why she keeps him so desperately. The girl, sobbing, muttered that she was all right. She was not injured. She simply could not restrain her tears. In front of her eyes was the mutilated skin of Sigrin. Scars covered his chest, hands, sides. Their appearance was frightening, like traces from many torment. These traces were not random. They burned it intentionally, again and again, exposing it to severe treatment. He knew that these wounds would remain with him forever. Each scar talked about the suffering experienced, about long years of pain. Fiona, shuddering, dared to ask who left these traces on his body. The boy's face changed right there. He closed, frowned, as if in a second erected a wall among himself and the world around him. He was sure that Fiona found out the truth from the doctor. After all, it was he who treated his wounds, which means he could tell her about it. The girl did not deny. And then Sigrin decided that it was precisely because of what she heard that she was now crying, unable to bear the truth. After all, that is why he asked her not to come in while the bandages were changed. He knew that it would hurt her to see his wounds, and was right. He was going to say that she always did this, but did not have time. Fiona rushed into his arms, as if trying to at least drown out the pain that he experienced. Sigrin smelled of medicines, and this smell only increased her pity. She was bitter to realize that he endured such cruelty. She pressed him to her, not letting go, because of her he experienced a terrible torture. The thought of this haunted her. Everything happened only because of one sentence she accidentally said. in which she mentioned his unfortunate childhood. The difference between read in the books and what he experienced was stunning. Fiona could not understand how it came to this, but the guy said it was not scary. There were many rude people among the mercenaries, and he was noted simply because he was the weakest. Fiona looked into his eyes and firmly said that it was not worth treating this as a trifle, because it was unfair. Sigrin decided that in this way she expresses sympathy, but her words sounded more like a reproach, as if he should not have been so easy to accept. To be honest, Fiona still did not realize either the existence of Sigrin or the reality of this world in which she ended up. Even during the brutal battle, it seemed to her that all this was not with her, as if she was looking at the events from afar, as a foreign fate. Rather, she simply ignored reality, but when she saw his scars, she could no longer turn a blind eye to it. This is her fault. If not for her, no one would beat Sigrin as a child. Now this awareness pressed her heart. She complained that she could not get closer to him, but now she understood. If he hate her, she would still stay nearby. Perhaps this is the only thing she can do in order to at least somehow atone for her guilt for those scars. She no longer doubted. Now she will always be next to Sigrin to support him. This was the best way for her to apologize to him. So, looking into his eyes, she quietly, but firmly, said that she sincerely regrets. Hearing her words, the guy frowned and abandoned that she was behaving strangely. It was not clear to him why she was so stubbornly trying to make amends for her guilt when there was no fault in his eyes. Now, he was sure that she was just trying to apologize for the fact that, on that day of his section, it seemed ridiculous to him because he had not thought about it for a long time. However, the girl immediately shook her head and said firmly that this was not at all about. The reason for her words was much deeper than he could have imagined. She could not restrain her tears. And this, it seems, only annoyed Sigrin. He frowned and ordered her to stop crying, as if he was painful to look at it. He was sure that she was not to blame for anything, so he did not see the point in her tears. No matter how circumstances are, she should not worry like that. Even when Sigrin spoke rudely, softness remained in his movements. No matter how hard he tried to seem tough, he was still just a child in which tenderness was hidden. The girl carefully looked at him and, without hesitation, neatly took his face in her palms. She wanted him to feel the warmth of her hands. It seemed that at that moment she imposed a spell, telling him not to hurt her anymore. Perhaps so she tried to protect himself. She knew that even if her wounds dragged on, the scars on Sigrin's heart would remain forever. But despite this, she wanted to protect him as much as she could. At heart, she hoped that her little desire would reduce his alertness. Maybe he will stop at least a moment to see a stranger in her. After all that was said, she smiled and offered him not to be at enmity. Let them at least just try to live together, even if friendship does not come out yet. Sigrin looked away and muttered that she was strange. First cries, then laughs. He could not understand her in any way, but it seemed that it confused him a little. He still stated that she could do what she wants. However, the light blush on his cheeks betrayed his real feelings, although he tried to hide them. Seeing his reaction, the girl began to suspect that he was not so against her offer. Even if he does not say this, she felt that he did not push her away. Yes, she will become a good friend for him. Even if he himself is not yet aware of this, she will be there and will do everything so that he no longer feels lonely. After that, she felt that her attitude to Sigrin had changed and wanted to spend more time with him. She invited him to eat cookies together, hoping that this would help them get closer. Although she was not sure whether she understood everything correctly, but at least he did not push her hands away and did not say that she would no longer touch him. This already seemed a little progress in their relationship. Given that he had previously been constantly subjected to violence, then his sensitivity to physical contact was quite expected. For him, even the slightest touch could seem to be a threat. But still, Fiona thought that the reason for his reaction was not only in the contact itself, but in the fact that she accidentally saw his scars. Perhaps this was a particularly painful topic for him. She told him that his injury began to look worse and warned him not to move, otherwise the wound could open again. Her voice sounded seriously, without unnecessary softness. However, Sigrin, as usual, assured her that everything was in order and he was almost healthy. Fiona, however, did not believe his words and insisted that he needed to keep peace. Until he completely recovers, he is better not to take risks. He should at least listen to her words, since she is still an older sister who cares about him. He became curious how old she was, since she so confidently calls herself the eldest. He tried to guess, but outwardly she seemed too small. She sighed embarrassedly, because in fact she was a year younger than him. But in order not to lose authority, she lied that she was already 13 years old. Sigrin was a little surprised. He always thought that she was younger, about 10 years old, and now his guesses were wrong. Hearing this, Fiona flared up. Does he also consider her a child? Abel constantly says that she is small, but does she really look for 10 years? But what can you do? As a child, she lived in the attic, and there was neither food nor normal heat. Apparently, this influenced her appearance. In any case, now it is clear that Sigrin is a year older than her, but she confidently stated that her psychological age is much more than it seems. The guy thought, perhaps the girl is mistaken, considering herself small. Apparently, she is well fed, so why does it not grow at all? It was strange. The girl understood that the matter was not in nutrition, but her weak endurance. After using magic, she felt fatigue and could not repeat the spell. It was like running. You can quickly start, but there were not enough forces for long distances. Looking at the boy seriously, she stated that from now on, she would try her best to grow up. The guy nodded, noticing that the main thing is not to stop and make efforts. Now that the boy's condition has improved and his spiritual balance has restored, it has become a little easier for her. The excitement was slightly receded. His face seemed carved from ivory, so perfect. Despite the fact that he is her child, she was looking forward to future education. She really wanted him to use his dazzling beauty and impress the Duchess. This could help him. The guy felt her gaze and involuntarily thought that he had something wrong with his face, but the girl immediately assured that everything was in order. Sigrin could no longer restrain himself and decided to ask directly, "Why does Fiona look at him so closely?" The girl, not embarrassed, replied that he was just beautiful. But then she added that, do not forget about his principles when he will meet someone in the future. She warned that even if he was he, she would not forgive anyone who would make her beloved heroine cry. Sigrin only nodded, recognizing her words, and noticed that he was thinking about it every day. But sometimes she says such that he did not have time to finish, and Fiona, feeling that the meaning slip away, asked him what exactly he wanted to say. Sigrin thought, and then admitted that sometimes he did not understand whose psychological age is more. Judging by her behavior, she does not at all realize how terrible people can be. But Fiona only grinned for this and stated that he was deeply mistaken because she was about to continue when Giron suddenly burst into the room. Interrupting their conversation, he loudly called the mistress, hastily informing that a huge monster was moving towards the second wall. Apparently, the entire military team had to urgently gather. Fiona, without wasting time, said that she understood and promised to immediately go there. Giron nodded gratefully, but as soon as she was about to go, Sigrin suddenly grabbed her by the hand. His voice sounded worried when he asked what she was doing. He could not understand why she was going there at all. And in general, he was right, because she never told him that he was a magician who caused to participate in the war. Then Fiona resolutely replied that she was really a combat magician, and her main task is to protect the second wall. She looked him straight and firmly said that he should accept this and let her go. But Sigrin only shook his head. For him, it sounded pointless, and Fiona did not understand what exactly he was talking about. He could not understand how something similar could happen in her life right now, at the most inopportune moment. It was too unexpected and strange. He simply could not realize that this is possible, especially at such a moment. The second wall seemed to be the most dangerous place, but it seemed to not realize it. She did not understand how fatal the situation in which she found herself could be. Even mercenaries who have passed many battles and experienced knights that fought on the margins of the war all their lives could die in the blink of an eye. But the child, unlike them, had no protection. He could not restrain his emotions and began to scream at Giron, demanding that he say at least something reasonable. He hoped that, although he could at least somehow explain what was happening. He could not understand that for the strongest shield in the north, Halon, the lack of people became so sharp that they began to take even children into their ranks. It seemed impossible. He could not understand whether the situation is really so critical that the only one who could provide protection was a small child. This fact hit him, and he could not find an explanation. The servant felt a slight embarrassment because he did not know how to explain the situation to the young man. He hesitated, trying to choose the right words, but nothing suitable occurred to him. Fiona could not allow Geron to drive the guy. Therefore, without hesitation, she stepped towards him and carefully took his hand. In her gesture, there was so much confidence and determination that this made everyone around freeze. She perfectly understood why Sigrin got angry. He always had a very developed sense of justice, and this has been manifested more than once in his actions. She herself wrote about this in her records. Most likely, he was annoyed not by the decision itself, but by injustice. He did not like that someone, similar to him, was sent to the battlefield, as if they were nothing more than pawns in someone else's game. Fiona, noticing his excitement, tried to calm him down. She smiled and said that she was all right. But Sigrin looked at her with horror in his eyes and could not believe that she was not afraid. The girl calmly replied that she simply had no other way out. Regardless of fear or doubt, she has nowhere else to go, so she made this decision. She needed to find a place where you can stop, and the duchy needed a magician. It was a mutually beneficial agreement, and she realized that she had no other chance. She firmly stated that this was only a deal, and there is nothing to be angry here. She chose this path herself, which means that you should not spend strength on unnecessary emotions. In the end, the decision to stay in this place belonged only to her. No one forced her to make this choice, so blaming someone else was pointless. She understood that until she has reached adulthood, she needed to live somewhere. And if so, then you have to put up with the conditions, even if she does not like them. It was important for the Duke of Halon to have a strong magician at his disposal. This was the only factor that was important in this situation. Sigrin thought, and then asked what was with her family. Fiona calmly replied that it does not matter, because she is illegitimate. When the guy heard her story, he fell silent, as if pondering every word. The girl said that her father, brothers, and sisters decided to send her here, away from home. They hoped that she would never return again. Sigrin, hearing this, was not surprised. He probably understood her feelings, because he went through something similar. No one will protect the one who was born a bastard. Such a person is forced to pay his price if he wants to survive. There is no free protection in this world. You have to pay for your childhood, one way or another. But, looking at her, he noticed that her situation is much worse. She could really die. He was surprised that she was not afraid. But the girl only calmly answered, if she is destined to die, then she did not have enough strength or skills to survive. In any case, she is sure of one thing: no one forced her. She came here voluntarily, realizing the possible consequences of her choice. Therefore, do not worry. She is not against the situation, which means he should not worry about her. Then, he decided that he had to leave. The girl did not stop him, because she knew that each of their conversations is only a short respite in front of future trials. But still, she noticed that he should be careful. In addition, it is too early now, but he had not yet had time to eat normally. These words of her angry him a little. Why does she care so much about him? Why does it establish any rules, as if it has the right to do so? The girl calmly replied, isn't it natural to take care of the wounded? This is simple human kindness, nothing more. Then the boy simply fell silent, not finding what to say. He was not used to such care, and did not know how to react to it. When she left, he seemed to want to say something else, but changed his mind. He only looked after her, thinking about her words. As a result, he only said nothing, but still said, let it return as soon as possible. This was the only thing he could say at that moment. The girl heard his words, but was already in a hurry. She only suggested that he said something, but did not turn around. With a sigh, she muttered quietly to herself that she regrets her delay. Although he did not know about it, it was important for her to apologize. Among the audience was the Duke of Abel, His gaze was gaze, and it seemed that he was not just observing, but assessed the situation with particular seriousness. Fiona did not expect to see him here, because she was sure that he was busy with his business. Most likely, he heard the whole conversation, and from this she felt uneasy. The features of his face remained strict, but something was read in the gaze, from which she was alarming. He looked as if he was angry, and this caused her fear. The conversation with the boy dragged on longer than she expected. They were in no hurry, and time flew quietly, but now she realized that she was too carried away by a conversation. Therefore, her delay looked quite logical. Nevertheless, feeling guilty, she again apologized for her delay, hoping that this would not cause unnecessary questions. Abel, it seems, was going to say something else, but then changed his mind. Later, she realized that this was not so important to pay attention to this. As a result, he only briefly noted that this is not the topic that should be discussed right now. Perhaps later, when the situation is more suitable. Then he turned to her and directly said that during the battle, she should be next to him. He made it clear that this is not a request, but a requirement. Without letting her object, he simply raised her in his arms and carried her with him. It was unexpected, but there was no point in resisting, because he was clearly not going to change the decision. In the battles, he was always next to her, so she did not understand why he focuses on this right now. Has something changed? However, she did not argue. She simply nodded in the sign that she understood him. After that, they moved to where the next battle was waiting for them. On that day, they successfully defended the second fortress wall. After that, life returned to the usual direction, and it seemed that everything again became ordinary. But, despite this, something has changed. Her relationship with Sigrin was now felt a little different, although she could not say exactly what the difference was. When it became known that Fiona is a magician, the attitude towards her has changed dramatically. Now he no longer caused her in her direction, did not let go of sharp comments, and did not try to hurt her with words. But, despite this, during their conversations, he often cast confused glances at her, as if he tried to understand something important, but could not put all the pieces into a single picture. This behavior seemed strange to her. Maybe he really considered her unusual, or just did not know how to relate to her now. In any case, she could not ignore it. Meanwhile, Sigrin finally completely recovered from the wounds. Now there was no reason to keep him in the castle, because he no longer needed to leave and constant supervision of doctors. But sending him back to the fourth wall also seemed wrong. After all, the mercenaries who mocked him were still there, which means that his return could turn into trouble. Fiona did not know what to do in this situation. Thoughts about this haunted her, and she went gloomy all day, trying to find the right solution. But soon, her thoughts were interrupted by the call of the Duke. He ordered her to come to his office, which only strengthened her anxiety. She understood that she had to make some decision. After all, Abel always fought next to her, and she could not stand aside when it concerned the honor of their castle. But the very fact that he accompanies her everywhere seemed strange. Was that distrust of her? Or did he doubt her power and skills? She knocked on the door of the office, and the Duke immediately allowed her to enter. As soon as she crossed the threshold, she immediately asked why he called her. He briefly replied that the conversation was long, and she better sit down. There was no irritation in his voice, but she realized that it would be about something important. But most of all, she was surprised by the fact that he called her by name. Previously, this did not happen, and this made her think why he suddenly changed his behavior. Then the Duke said that according to the doctor, the boy whom she saved completely recovered and can now leave the castle. At this moment, Fiona realized that perhaps the Duke was waiting for a decision from her. Should she put Sigrin? But she had not yet decided what to do with him. She just nodded, agreeing with his words. And he, carefully watching her reaction, recalled that he usually does not welcome the appearance of strangers in the castle. She understood his position, and in general, she agreed with him. But when she looked up, she noticed that the Duke suddenly smiled slightly. It embarrassed her. She did not understand what he was thinking about, but it was obvious. He conceived something, and she had to find out. He became curious. Why did she let this guy? Did she really know who he was really? Maybe they had some kind of connection? Or did she have other reasons? Abel, most likely, already found out the personality of this guy. He is not one of those who leave questions without answers, especially if it concerns something important. And if he really found out who Sigrin is, now he knows that in fact he was not just a child, but a condemn. There are usually no choice in such situations. Sometimes the only way out is to go to the end, whatever the consequences. But she pretended not to understand what he was talking about. Is it so easy to admit to something so serious? If it became known that one of the ordinary people owns the secret of the imperial family, this would be too suspicious. Therefore, she said that she knew only one thing. He is an orphan, and that Sigrin once performed small assignments for mercenaries. This explained a lot, but not all. When he looks at her so closely, it seems to her that his gaze penetrates directly into the soul, as if he sees her through. But it's better not to get hung up on this. Compared to her, this boy does not stand out anything special, just another orphan without the past. Honestly, he himself does not fully understand who she is. Sometimes it seems to be an ordinary child of her age, alive, direct, and at other moments he behaves so coldly and reasonably that he has doubts. He simply does not know what to think about her. The girl considered herself quite normal, but the Duke saw the situation differently. He knew that this was only her own perception. Any other, looking at her, could call her a genius. He thought for a long time. Should he be careful in her presence, or, conversely, take her under his defense? It's good that she is smart, but this is a danger. Secret and uniqueness can be both a blessing and a curse, like a sharp blade. The girl thought about the words of the Duke, and her heart sank with anxiety. Is he going to expel her? This fear made her clench his fists tightly, but she tried not to show excitement. However, the Duke unexpectedly said completely different. He does not want to expel her at all, but on the contrary, he is going to leave it. Moreover, he wants her to gradually take up new tasks. The girl smiled in relief. She felt the severity falls from her shoulders. Now she does not need to be afraid that she will be driven away, and she readily agreed to new assignments. Abel has always been alert in relation to the imperial family. When they sent a strange girl as support, he could not help but suspect them of hidden motifs. If she does not behave according to age, his suspicions will only intensify. Recently, he was informed about the concern of the inhabitants of the Fourth Wall. Mercenaries, who were instructed to maintain order, behaved aggressively and molested local girls, causing dissatisfaction. Just think, these people dared to intimidate those whom he vowed to protect. Their impudence did not know the boundaries, but at the same time required immediate intervention. Abel looked gloomy and harsh, creating a truly terrible impression. However, he soon handed the girl a document, ordering to read it carefully. The girl carefully took the papers in her hands and froze from the shock. Her eyes widened and her fingers trembled when she saw what was written in these lines. Fiona carefully studied the people around, trying to understand whether it was the very group with which Sigrin was. At heart, she guessed why Abel entrusted her precisely this task, but was not sure that she liked it. Despite the obvious facts, Fiona could not figure out what to do. The guy was completely healthy, which means he did not need her help, but for some reason she had to do this. It became clear to her that the Duke understood her main problem, even if she did not mention her in a word. It was a little scared, but at the same time made it clear that he was observant and did not lose sight of anything. That is why, without hesitation, he announced to her that he was temporarily passing under her leadership soldiers from the Fourth Wall. It was unexpected, but, apparently, the Duke had a good reason for this. Fiona perfectly understood his mood. If these soldiers dared to show disobedience, now they will pay in full for it. Halons are always paid tenfold, both for kindness and for errors. Inspecting the surroundings, Fiona realized that this place is really standing out among others. She occupied her even more, why the Duke was so worried about the child, because in his voice he felt special concern. Abel noted that they were still about to go to the Fourth Wall, so there was no point in worrying about such things now. He clearly did not see a big problem in this. He invited her to deal with this case along the way, and Fiona agreed. She was quite happy with such a decision. and she assured that they could safely rely on her. The road turned out to be snowy, and this caused them genuine admiration. At some point, Fiona noticed that someone blinded a very impressive snowman, and this involuntarily made her smile. Sigrin only sighed heavily, obviously not sharing her enthusiasm. His expression was strange, as if he tried to understand why she suddenly started talking about it. The girl could not understand why he was behaving so detached. She looked at him in bewilderment, wondering, did he never allow himself to just rejoice like a child? Did he never feel delighted with the first snow? The guy only turned away, indifferently throwing that he had enough worries without it. He did not see the point in such trifles, but deep down, he was nibbled something else. The insult that she did not warn him in advance about her decision to go on the battlefield. He tried to convince himself that this did not hurt him. He is not offended at all. Nevertheless, the expression of his face gave out irritation, which he could not hide. To change the subject, he said that if she has free time, he could help her blind something from the snow. She just sighed. So far, she did not have time for the game. First of all, she must fulfill the assignment that the Duke gave her, but she's still pleased that he suggested that. So after she finishes the matter, they will have the opportunity to spend a little more time together. And the guy at this time wondered that she found in him in general. Why does she want to play with the way he, bastard, who does not even understand what can be fun for children of their age? He did not know what to say. There was not a single good word in his head that he could tell her. And it was difficult to believe that this fair-haired girl really possesses magical forces. Perhaps the fact is that he never saw her in battle. She seemed to him like a heroine of a winter fairy tale. Her eyes sparkled with red, like rose petals, and snow. White hair fell with light strands. Against the backdrop of snow, her skin seemed even paler, as if it was created from the winter cold itself. In her movements, there was something light and graceful, reminiscent of a white rabbit jumping in the snow. Nevertheless, it was difficult to believe that this tiny mag girl protects one of the most dangerous walls. He was angry with those who brought this child to such a dangerous situation, as well as those who ignored everything that happened to him. It was unfair and cruel. Fiona then explained that her actions have their own benefits, and do not be angry, since all this will ultimately benefit. Her gaze was decisive and calm. He was annoyed by her calmness, by the fact that she reconciled with this position, instead of worrying about his security. It didn't look right. Fiona continued to look out the window, immersed in her thoughts. He could not understand why she was so worried about someone who did not mean anything important to her. He could not understand why she was worried about an orphan from a group of mercenaries. Maybe she is hiding something? Perhaps she knows that he has imperial blood, or maybe she pursues her goals to use it, or even destroy it. He still doubted her intentions, although he wanted to believe her. He wanted to trust her, but could not. It was difficult for him to open to people, and doubts tormented his soul, especially when it came to a possible betrayal. He thought he would not survive her betrayal. But now she turned to him, and not expecting, he asked what she really wanted from him. Fiona asked what the rules are in the hired group, since she had never encountered such people before. She was sure that there was a hierarchy. He replied that everything is simple in their world. Only the strongest survive. It was a rule that they adhered to in any situation, without exception. In the hired group, everyone was inclined to those who were stronger and obeyed him. The weak had no right to leadership, and their opinion was not taken into account. He explained that if she wants to manage mercenaries, she needs to prove that she is a threat to the rest. This is the only way they recognize her. Fiona understood him. It was a typical situation when strong controls the weak, and the weak should obey. She knew that she needed to be strict and merciless. She smiled, understanding everything that he said, and added that now she would definitely be effective in control. She is sure that even the most stupid will understand her. He was in shock when he saw her face. She was absolutely calm and even rejoiced, as if this situation did not scare her, but rather enthusiastically. Fiona thanked him for his help, assuring that this would be very useful to her. But the guy was completely confused. He could not understand what she was talking about at all. The boy asked the question why she was interested in how they treated mercenaries. This surprised him, because the mercenaries have always been part of their life. But why does she ask about it? The girl with a slight smile explained that this is all connected with the order of the Duke. She was intrigued, not knowing how exactly mercenaries behave with her, and therefore asked. Her interest was sincere, since she is not very familiar with mercenaries. But the boy, feeling the tension, asked her to stop questions, stopping the conversation. He became interested in what the Duke ordered, but before she could answer, the girl suddenly began to sneeze, which interrupted their conversation. Suddenly, the carriage stopped abruptly, and they both did not understand what happened. Everything happened so suddenly that no one had time to react to this stop. The girl, noticing the surprise of the boy, calmly told him that they had already arrived, and now they are in place. Everything turned out to be much simpler than he expected. It was a strange place, not as terrible as the second, but still unusual. The boy looked around, trying to understand what exactly here could surprise him. She added that now she needed to immediately complete the task of Abel, without unnecessary words. This meant that time was not waiting, and she would have to rush. She hastily left the carriage, but the boy took her hand. She asked in surprise what this means, trying to understand his reaction to her actions. He calmly explained that the carriage was quite high, and it would be difficult for her to get out of it without help. This made her think that she could fall. She hesitated a little, but he added that if she comes out like this, she could really fall. This made her think about the situation again. He was the first to get out of the carriage, offering his hand to help her go down. It was his way to take care, preventing her from taking risks. Sigrin, feeling how she hesitates, asked her to take his hand and go down carefully. He wanted to help that everything goes as safer as possible. Fiona was in full shock from his attention. She did not expect him to take care of her so much. This was for her a new experience that surprised her. But after an instant of surprise, she could not hold back a smile and laughed. It was a reaction to his care, which she perceived as something very touching. The boy was a little embarrassed because of her laughter, and immediately asked that she was so amused. She apologized, trying to calm him down so as not to create an awkward situation. In the end, she held out her hand. Still, Fiona was a strange girl, sweet and friendly, even with unfamiliar guys like him. He still cannot completely trust her care and kindness, although she is trying. Many thoughts in his head prevent him from believing in the sincerity of her intentions. He was still near her, not daring to leave her. Time stretched, and he could not avoid the feeling that something important was hiding between them. When the girl thanked him for his help, he felt embarrassed. Her words were simple, but they had sincerity, and he did not know how to react to it. She smiled at him. Her face became even more beautiful, and in this moment he felt her presence as if illuminating everything around. If he continues to perform such small good deeds, perhaps someday he will be able to return to her everything she does for him. Suddenly, a thought arose in his head. Maybe he should become kinder. He himself did not know what kind of impulse it was, but he felt that something should change. The master asked with interest whether this is really true, and the girl confirmed his doubts. She did not try to justify herself. She just answered confidently. She noticed that the Duke should have been on him. This gave out his belonging to a high position. His gaze became more focused. The master said that he and the girl are too small to make such decisions, so this is unlikely to be possible. His words were filled with doubt and cold calculation. He ordered the girl to stop carrying nonsense and going home. He was sure that her words did not matter, and did not want to waste time on empty conversations. Since no one knew her for the 4th degree, it was understandable. She apologized, realizing that her opinion does not matter in the eyes of the master. But he still doubted the correctness of his decision. If you read it again, it might seem that her words had more sense than he thought. Now his behavior has become more formal, and she was pleased with this. He seemed to be ready to accept the situation more serious than before. She introduced herself as Fiona Green and explained that she was sent here with the task of dealing with incidents on the 4th wall. She was configured to solve the problem. He asked if she knew what exactly happened, and she replied that she had already studied everything in the document. She confidently stated that she was ready to act if he was not trusted. The gentleman replied that it is not worth doing this, because the situation is in order. He did not want to delve into the details and considered that the intervention is superfluous. He said that she should tell them if she needs to help. First of all, they suggested that the military engage in the capture of criminals, and they would cope with this. Secondly, he advised to gather all people on the village square. Thirdly, she suddenly stopped and looked at the guy, thinking about what to do. Fiona asked the guy if he knew where mercenaries usually gather to understand their actions and approaches. She hoped that he would give the necessary information. The guy replied that mercenaries are usually gathering in a bar by the wall. The girl nodded and advised that the man would definitely take this into account when planning further actions. Preparation is completed. Although people could look at her age with distrust, she felt that everything was done correctly. Mercenaries probably do their work at the highest level. The boy, feeling the alarm, asked what exactly the Duke instructed her to do. He no longer understood what was its role in this dangerous business. Fiona was not sure, but she realized that she did not plan to let go of the mercenary. Judging by the behavior of Abel, the punishment can be very harsh. Perhaps this will be the cut-off part of the body. Fiona carefully noticed that this was not quite for his mind. He is only 14, and it would be better not to tell him everything that could greatly shake him. Therefore, she said that these are just small details, and most importantly, to bear a fair sentence and return. But internally, she was not sure how exactly everything would be. Since the Duke was not going to go with her, she could leave all this uncertain. In any case, Sigrin was clearly not going to accompany her, and she reconciled with this. But the guy suddenly said that he wanted to go with her. This brought the girl in complete confusion. He added that he would definitely go with her, and asked if she wanted his presence. Fiona turned away, and restrainedly said that perhaps that's the whole point. It just seemed to her that such things would be too cruel to children, and they would not understand this. Then the guy, without hiding discontent, reminded her that she seemed to have forgotten who was on the battlefield. The scars that she saw is not old wounds, but very recent. He continued, assuring her that perhaps she did not believe him because of their relationship, but, despite this, he knew pretty much in this matter and knows what he was able to help. The girl, approaching closer, noticed that she was certainly known. But how all this is connected with his decision to go with her, she did not understand. Why is it important for her? The boy explained that this is not quite what he wanted to say. But in any case, he is ready to become her protection if she needs it, and to be those who cover her. He added that many of those who are nearby are not looking at her with good eyes, and two people can always cope better than one in such a situation. He slightly lifted an eyebrow, and noticing that she realized, suggested continuing the way. If she is ready, then you can move on without wasting time for doubt. She was not completely sure of his words, but, seeing his anxiety, she realized that this was important to him. He clearly worried about her safety. He even blushed a little, which did not hide from her gaze. This made her smile, as if she felt that, despite all the seriousness, something had changed. If all this did not make sense, then she still decided to continue to follow him. His confidence seemed to be transmitted to her, and despite everything, she trusted him. The guy told everyone to see how two children go to them, and one of them is probably the Duke's face. It was noticeable, but he himself still doubted this. However, many still doubted, considering her a fraud, because it is difficult to believe that this is really a child. The children's body seemed too inconvenient for such a role. It is strange that Abel gave her power in the duchy, despite his doubts. He still entrusted her with this, although Fiona could not understand what exactly he chose her. It would be, of course, easier to send an adult, for example, his servant Geron. But she decided not to waste time and focus on fulfilling her task. All that is needed is to decide how to punish mercenaries. Honestly, the importance of punishment was not only in its severity, but also in how it would be perceived. The mercenary who committed the crime had to feel it. For example, she understood that it was necessary to warn everyone that if they do the same as he, they were waiting for the same fate, that everyone knew that the consequences are inevitable. If everything is settled correctly, this will help maintain order in the village. But if the punishment was too soft, then Fiona knew that this could lead to the opposite effect. People will always think, if there are no serious consequences, What prevents the same from repeating the same? So people are arranged, and this could shake her authority. Fiona began to reflect on what punishment was suitable for the northern region, where they could chop off his hand for theft. This place was known for its cruelty in matters of punishment. Since the criminals sexually harassed women and children, she came to the conclusion that the only way out is to cut off their important parts of the body so that the punishment was fair. When Sigrin heard her offer, he was horrified and immediately asked. Fiona calmly replied that nothing is like that. This is just a method suitable for the region. As she expected, Fiona understood that it would be worthwhile to tell Sigrin so that he would return first, but she decided not to rush, because the situation demanded thoughtfulness. If the solution is not found, she may have to drive them out of the castle walls, into the forests where strong and dangerous monsters live, ready to deal with them. Fiona decided that it was better to let the criminals choose themselves, that they are worse for them, punishment or death, offering two options to realize all the seriousness of their position. Sigrin finally turned to Fiona and noted that they had already arrived at the place. The atmosphere became more tense, but the decision has not yet been made. Everyone around discussed that these children are still too small and do not understand what the Lord really thinks about. It was difficult for many to believe that the girl really represents the Duke. The situation was becoming more unclear, but Fiona was ready to give a team. The guy was seriously configured, but she, in turn, preferred a calm and polite approach. Fiona asked them to politely move away, hoping that the situation would not get out of control and that they could settle everything without unnecessary stress and sharp steps. The men calmly looked at Fiona and said that she could continue the path, letting them down. This did not cause them either irritation or discontent. The girl thanked them for their attention, and Sigrin could not understand how Fiona retains such a calm endurance in such situations. It was difficult for him to realize this. Fiona, in turn, only smiled and said that it makes no sense to be angry at such moments. She learned not to succumb to emotions in such situations. Suddenly, a young girl ran up to Fiona and asked her to stop. She was pleasantly surprised that the mistress really came, as promised. Sigrin stood bewilderment, not understanding what was happening. He watched what was happening, but could not tie all this into a single whole. His thoughts were confused. Fiona quietly explained to him that everything was in order, reassured him. She added that she does not understand how this girl became responsible for such a task, but this is her business. Meanwhile, she noted that it was not easy to cope with mercenaries, especially if such people violate order in the village and threaten the peace of local residents. Fiona believed that because of such actions, people would be uneasy. She noticed that the woman, although she tried to intervene, did not want to stay away. Charlotte said that she could not stand calm when she saw that the child was going against such dangerous people. She could not ignore such a threat. Fiona asked if she could find out the name of this bold girl. She introduced herself as Charlotte, and Fiona nodded, impressed by her determination. Fiona thanked Charlotte for her care and attention. She was touched by how this girl was worried about her, despite her youth and inexperience. However, Fiona recalled that they need to continue the path. Turning to Sigrin, she said that it was time to go, and they could not waste time if they want to be in time. When they came closer, they suddenly heard loud cries. These were alarming sounds that immediately attracted their attention. They stopped, dumbfounded and not knowing what to do. From afar, they saw a man who tried to somehow stop the group of mercenaries. He fought desperately, but they could not understand what caused this conflict. The mercenaries shouted that this was their territory and everyone should be cleaned. It sounded menacing, and the situation became more and more tense. The threat was in the air. Then one of them finally realized that these are the very people that he had heard about before. These were the same people who needed to face, and now they were here. Everything became clear. They were strong and dangerous, and it was not easy to cope with them, several guards. The situation was far from as simple as they hoped. The woman approached the largest of the mercenaries. He looked at her, but noticed Sigrin, and smiling, began to call him a jerk, which sounded mockingly and rudely. They were surprised that the man whom they called with a rice worm ended up here. And besides, he is still alive. It was unexpected, and no one could understand how possible. but the girl quickly took Sigrin by the hand, trying to calm him down. She whispered to relax, after which she confidently headed for the man, ready to talk to him. His huge figure was noticeable against the background of the village, and he constantly created problems to local residents with his behavior. The presence of this person made everyone be nervous. He often arranged riots, terrorizing the village. The boy Sigrin more than once went to his bullying. Plus, he committed robberies, attacks, and even harassment. Fiona, who introduced himself as the messenger of the Duke Abel, announced that she had come with an instruction to stop useless resistance and return order. Her words did not take the proper effect. The man grinned and began to mock her. He did not understand why such a young girl decided to command, and this was only excited. He continued his threat, claiming that if the mercenaries of the Duke come, she would be an even greater disaster, and her attempts to change something would be in vain. The people who stood nearby began to shout that it was they who stopped this monster when he attacked the village, and became heroes in their eyes. But it was not so simple. Several local people began to shout that they really saved the village, but Fiona knew that in fact the situation was much more complicated, and no one was such a hero. Fiona, realizing that conversations would not help, used her magic, hitting with lightning next to that man to demonstrate her strength and force him to silence. The man was very scared, not understanding what had just happened. He was dumbfounded, not knowing how to respond to such an unexpected demonstration of power. The words of hatred began to pour from his mouth, but the people standing nearby also could not believe in what was happening. Everything around was frozen in surprise and fear. Fiona calmly said that it would be much better if he simply listened to her. At this moment, it was clear that she did not intend to retreat. She added that now everything fell into place, and everyone had to understand that her strength was not a joke for him. But this did not end in her determination. Fiona, restraining his attempts to protest, said that it was not yet decided. Then she captured several other men, strengthening her power in this situation. Lightning, hitting around, frightened the remaining ones, and they, seeing her strength, no longer tried to resist. She said that she would leave everything as it is until they learned to obey. Fiona, turning to everyone, said that they should continue to stand on their knees until they understand that it would be much worse to punish for disobedience than now. Now that everything has finally calmed down, Fionn Green may begin to deal with the case in court. This moment was long expected, and the voltage in the air was felt. A few days ago, a serious incident occurred in the pub. The attack on 5 people, as well as the theft of many valuable things. This business is clearly not simple. Sigrin, watching what was happening, could not help but think. She was a real master, and it was visible. Her abilities were amazed. He could not help but notice it. Even more amazing was that she fought against the second wall. In her magic, there was something unusual. She used it much more effectively than others. He saw people who can create a ball of a ball, but what she could do was at a different level. He first met such a master as Fiona. Sigrin gradually began to understand why the Duke held her so close. She was a young and confident girl, standing in front of the men who seemed rude and cruel. Regardless of what will happen next, this event will remain in the memory of people. Fiona made a deep impression on them, and her unusualness did not go unnoticed. Rumors about this will begin to spread throughout the earth. Moreover, the attitude towards Fiona in the castle of Halon was so good that it was impossible to perceive it just as a soldier. Duke Halon is not the one who would do such things for no reason. Sigrin began to wonder what the Duke Abel really wants from this unusual girl. Sigrin often thought about whether he could ever find an answer to an important question. However, this time it seems, the answer was never found. He was too young to understand all the difficulties of the situation. Sigrin was one of the orphans who joined the group of mercenaries. He felt lost and did not know how to help Fiona. His position seemed hopeless. He doubted that he would be able to see her again. Sigrin told himself that perhaps they could not be even friends. She will quickly forget about him as soon as they return to the castle. Fiona offered 2 options. She said that the first was to go beyond the walls of the castle, and they should be completely naked, without weapons and protection, so as not to violate the rules. All those present were dumbfounded by her words. not believing that she could offer something so crazy. But it seems that this is not all that she wanted to say. She voiced the second option. The second option was much more terrible. She suggested that men lose an important part of their body. Sigrin realized that this was not a joke, and horror captured him. Hearing these words, the crowd literally froze in horror. Many people in a panic began to whisper. The girl, however, was just smiling, not experiencing the slightest doubt. Men in confusion began to outrage loudly. Sigrin was stunned by what was happening and did not know how to react to such cruelty. It was too much for him. The mistress seemed to mock their fear, because no one expected that she would offer such terrifying options for punishment. Everyone felt that their life was hanging in the balance. Of course, Fiona may have planned to show some mercy, but no one could say for sure. Cold was red in her eyes, and everything around became even more terrible. The choice was simple: to go outside, faced with danger and humiliation, or to accept a cruel option that would break their life forever. Sigrin did not know how to choose. The men were angry, but they did not understand why they had to carry this punishment. They felt the injustice of accused them. They were especially outraged by the fact that they seemed to be not faced with northerners, with their wild and non-silent customs. It seemed absurd. Without mercenaries who would protect them, they could hardly survive. They would not have a chance against the monsters hiding in these wild lands. The Duchy of Halon promised to compensate the mercenaries with all the losses that they incurred, protecting the land from the monsters, making this risk to standing. Although Abel Halon was cold in appearance, he always remained fair. He knew well how to appreciate the courage of those who fought for the sake of his duchy. But there was also another benefit. Mercenaries could get a decent reward, selling trophies that they took from the bodies of monsters after the victory. She understood that all these people came here because of their interests. Halon needed people to protect, and mercenaries, money. Everything was obvious. She knew that if they could not make a choice, she would decide for them. In the end, there was little time, and it was necessary to act decisively. One of the men began to scream, demanding that she be untied immediately. But she understood that it was necessary to finish it quickly so as not to detain people on this cold day. Honestly, she herself trembled from the cold for a long time. And others were silent, as if they did not know what to say, freezing in anticipation of the decision. The girl was not sure that it seemed that the temperature had fallen a little. Perhaps she only seemed to her. Everything around began to feel a little colder than before. Suddenly, behind the Duke's voice rang out, who asked what decision they made. He approached imperceptibly and was nearby, as if appearing from nowhere. The girl turned around and was a little surprised to see him nearby. She did not expect that the Duke would be so close at the moment when they discussed the important. Now it became clear to her that it was the Duke that was the reason for that cold sensation. It seemed that the frosty air came with his appearance, as if behind him. She turned again, and raising her eyebrows a little, asked him what brought him here at that moment. What he is looking for in this situation, and what he needs from them. The Duke calmly replied that he did not have to have a specific reason to inspect his territory. He was the master of these places, and this was his right. Meanwhile, Geron muttered quietly, feeling awkward for everything that was happening. The girl replied that she perfectly understands him. There is nothing wrong with that. Then the Duke raised her in his arms without any words, showing unexpected care. He also asked what she was thinking about the proposed options and how she evaluates them. The girl replied that she was simply interested in what moment he began to listen. She was alert because she could not understand what exactly interested him. The Duke, smiling slightly, said that his attention was attracted by the words that they were wild, non-civilized northerners. This caused his interest and desire to hear more. Now the girl realized that their situation was critical. If they are lucky, they will remain alive, but with great difficulties. She offered them a choice of two options. The first option of punishment was very strange and cruel. They had to go beyond the walls of the castle naked, or lose part of the body, capable of reproduction. He liked both options. She did not understand why she gave them such a choice. It was something incomprehensible and strange. The reasons for her solution remained a mystery to her. The girl who was witnessed said that both options were too cruel. Therefore, She wanted to show mercy and stop it. She could not do otherwise. The Duke, despite her words, smiled and calmly said that mercy would not help here. He was sure that such feelings were not appropriate here. He recalled that he always said that he would destroy those who dare to raise their hand to his people. Those who commit a crime will have to bear severe punishment. The Duke approached men without pity. He stepped on them with such force that they felt a terrible pain. It was his decision, and he was not going to stop. He said that people like them are completely not needed in his world. Their fate was decided, and no excuses will change its decision. Despite the fact that the Duke held her in his arms, rage was burning in his eyes. The thirst for blood was so strong that goosebumps ran through her skin. She felt it in the air. The Duke said that since they dared to look at his kingdom, his rule should be cruel. He is obliged to follow the rules that he established. Otherwise, he would not be a duke. He decided to punish. Both had to lose the part of the body that caused their crime. After that, they will be kicked over the walls of the castle so that they no longer bother. He ordered the men to immediately get down to business. He himself turned around and, holding the girl's hand, began to leave, not looking around. Everything was decided, and he was not going to linger. Turning to Fiona, the Duke said that next time she should not worry about such trifles. Everything has already been decided, and her anxiety was now superfluous. He recalled that such decisions can jeopardize the lives of many people. Abel was cruel and evil, and his actions always had serious consequences. But she was wondering why Abel, who was always so unfriendly and bad in nature, decided to go through all this. What could encourage him to go in such a way, despite his tamed malice? The Duke Abel Halon has done this whole long way for a reason. Its main reason was anxiety about Lady Fiona. Despite his cold appearance, he could not remain indifferent to its position. The lady, hearing this, looked in surprise at Giron, as if doubting that everything he had heard. She even asked if she understood him correctly, because such words sounded unexpectedly. If he said that the end of the world would come tomorrow, it would be easier to believe in the fact that the Duke is really worried. The very thought of this seemed impossible. Giron calmly explained that his lordship has a complex and difficult character. He is not one of those who openly express his emotions, so it is necessary to perceive his behavior correctly. This is true. To be honest, the Duke is more like an unpleasant person than good. Its sharpness and coldness scare away. But something more is hidden behind this. He is terrible to express emotions. The manner in which he does this is even worse. And yet, no matter how difficult it may be, this time he really came here due to anxiety about her. The girl was surprised, but Giron continued. In his opinion, the Duke most likely did not expect that she could cope with this task. Perhaps he was even sure that she would give up. However, this does not mean that the Duke is just such a person. In any case, Fiona should be more confident in herself, because she coped no matter what. Although Giron himself does not fully understand what his mercy thinks, he is sure that Fiona will soon know everything herself. Everything will fall into place over time. After these words, he decided to leave them together. He said that he would go to buy something warm, and they can continue to sculpt a snowman together. Fiona agreed, although she noticed that he looked slightly excited. This was a little concerned about her, but she decided not to get hung up on this, because, perhaps, he was just tired or thought about something. Instead of racking her head over this, she decided to just have fun, playing with Sigrin. She did not want to load herself with unnecessary thoughts when it was possible to just enjoy the moment. She turned to the guy and, smiling, asked if he could connect his head and body. It seemed to her an interesting task, and she was curious if he would cope. The guy confidently replied that he could, and immediately set to work. In just a few minutes, everything was ready, and the result looked much better than expected. Fiona was delighted, sincerely thanked him, and added that now she had only to gently align everything to look even better. While he was watching her efforts, a slight smile appeared on his face, but soon he was slightly embarrassed, as if he did not expect to follow her actions so carefully. He suddenly looked at Fiona and, after a little hesitation, asked what she was going to do on. Apparently, he wanted to continue the conversation. The girl thought for a while, and then shrugged, answering that she did not know. She will just live as she lived until nothing changes. However, the guy clearly asked about something else. Realizing this, Fiona squinted. He spoke not about her future as a whole, but about something more specific. Then she asked herself, what exactly did he want to know? She looked at him, not quite understanding what he had in mind, and asked what he had just said, hoping that he would explain more precisely. The guy calmly repeated that he would like to know if she was going to come. His voice sounded smooth, but in his eyes the expectation of her answer was read. The girl smiled because she did not understand at all what he was talking about. Her reaction seemed so sincere and carefree that it only angered him more. He looked at her intently and directly said that he wanted to know if she would come again to meet him. Hidden hope sounded in his voice. The girl blinked in surprise. She did not expect such a question. Now he really asks if she will come, and it seems that this is not a joke at all. He looked very embarrassed, which finally confused her. She could not understand why he behaved so strangely, but he suddenly turned away and, trying to hide emotions, quit that it does not matter. He did not even think to complicate even more. Sigrin would grin if he had not felt so vulnerable. It seemed to him that he was just an object of care for her, but even he understood that it was stupid. The girl confidently approached him and, not looking away, said that this was not true. She promised that she would come again. Then she easily took his hand. Sigrin flashed, but the girl did not pay attention to it and added that she would come to him every day. He hastily turned away and muttered that she did not need to force herself to come so often. But the girl quickly reminded that it was she who was the first to invite them to become friends. Therefore, she will come, no matter what. And this is not discussed. Sigrin looked at her in amazement. He did not expect such an answer, and inside him, something warm trembled. After these words, silence reigned, and it became a little embarrassed. Both did not know what to say next. The girl wondered why he was silent. Perhaps she said something wrong. Fiona felt awkwardly, as if she were not at ease. In order not to give out embarrassment, she decided to be distracted and began to mentally count the sheep, imagining how they jumped through an imaginary fence, one after another. Suddenly, the guy interrupted her thoughts, turning to her with a request. Hope sounded in his voice when he said that he wanted her to visit him more often. Fiona immediately confirmed that she would definitely do this. After all, since he cannot freely come to the castle, it means that she herself must make sure that their meetings continue. In response, he admitted that he was going to find a job in order to ever come to it himself, already without any obstacles and prohibitions. It seemed to him unfair that only she was making efforts to meet. If they are friends, then he must take a step towards, so as not to force her to constantly go to him alone. After all, the Halon castle is not just a place where you can go to anyone. If he says that he will come there, then he intends to take a high position in Halon to have the right to be near her. He perfectly understood that his words might seem to her empty dreams. After all, he was just an orphan, devoid of family, house, and any connections. But Fiona did not doubt it. She firmly stated that she believes that he would succeed, and one day he would be able to achieve everything he wants. And not only this, over time, he can achieve much more than he himself can now imagine. When he matures, a bright future awaits him, a life filled with income, recognition, and strength. Next to him will certainly be the one who will give him care and love, who can heal his heart, no matter how wounded it may be. Fiona promised that everything would be fine. Moreover, she swore that she would help him achieve his goals and take a step towards this future. She promised herself that she would do this as soon as she saw a scar on his face. Then, on that frosty day, she decided that she would finish this snowman, no matter how cold. Soon a servant came, but she did not even pay attention to him. She was more worried that she really became a friend of Sigrin, and this thought filled her with pride. Days replaced each other, turning in the years. 5 years have passed already, and now she again stood in the same place near the high stone wall, immersed in memories. Looking at endless snowy expanses, she thought, was she really crazy? Once he chose Halon, this was a place that froze to the bones, her house? She still could not find the answer. Is there any point in making winter here never ended? Or is it just a whim of fate with whom she had to come to terms with? Frost made his way to the bones. The cold fettered her movements, and she no longer knew how to deal with this feeling. She is tired of the cold, from constant snow, from the eternal winter. 5 years have passed since she arrived in Halon, but the cold was still stronger than her. Now she is 18, but she is still helpless before winter icy breath. Men persistently warned the lady to be on the alert and did not lose vigilance. The danger could have been in wait at any time, and they were worried about its safety. They asked her anxious questions, trying to verify her readiness. What would she do if the monsters suddenly appear from the darkness? Will she be ready for such a turn of events? Fiona only waved her hand back, considering that this soldier must have been in a real battle for the first time. He seemed too excited and uncertain. Taking a closer look at him, she felt a strange feeling of familiarity. Soon, I guessed. This is Alan. With a smile, she told him not to worry in vain. Now she was completely concentrated. Neither fear nor doubts could shake her. She knew why here and what she should do. If it loses concentration, at least for a moment, it can turn into serious problems. You need to be on the alert so as not to miss anything important. However, it was not worth worrying about her. It is better to let the men carefully examine the surroundings. The enemy can be much closer than it seems. As soon as someone was distracted, at least for a second, and he could immediately turn into prey for monsters. In such conditions, one cannot afford to relax. Fiona noticed that Alan was much more shy than she expected. Obviously, he needs support, and she decided to reassure him a little. Stepping closer, she gently, but confidently, said that there was nothing to be afraid of. She is here precisely in order to prevent the worst. This guy was clearly embarrassed, and it was noticeable in his behavior. It seemed that he really liked Fiona, and he did not know how to behave next to her. But suddenly, as if trying to distract himself from his embarrassment, he screamed loudly. He warned her that there was a lot of demons around, and that she needed to be more careful. A genuine panic sounded in his voice. He was very scared, because in truth, he did not have much combat experience, and such situations scared him to horror. However, Fiona only sighed. She understood that it makes no sense to try to calm him if he could not pull himself together and focus on the task. She looked at him more attentively. This soldier was still too young, inexperienced. He needed not only support, but also protection by more experienced fighters. Sigrin, who stood next to her, carefully watched the situation. He as quietly but firmly said that she was not standing idle, and better stepped a little to the side. Once the presence of Sigrin caused completely different feelings in her. They did not disappear even after so much time. Something warm still lived in her heart. But now that he stands against the backdrop of this gloomy, sinister landscape, something frightening appeared in his appearance, as if he himself became part of this dark picture. He noticeably matured and became truly beautiful. Fiona turned to him, and Sigrin, grinning, looked at her with curiosity, asking what she needed. Despite external changes, he was still at the transitional age. Now he is already 19, he is officially adult, but he was still a youthful in him. Fiona noticed that he should apologize for scaring that soldier so much. However, the guy objected that Abel said, "All newcomers are already trained in battle. If he has already begun to be afraid because of such a little thing, then the real problems are still ahead." Therefore, he was not going to worry about it. It is better to concentrate and practice. It was only the beginning, but the men already understood. The situation is so that there was almost no chance of surviving. If this goes further, they really are the end. Abel was perplexed why Sigrin behaved strangely with Fiona. After all, he never had problems with other people. What is so touched in her? Fiona only grinned and ordered him to simply observe. Then, turning to the soldiers, she said that there were no reasons for excitement, and they could relax. She was the same as they. She was no different, did not require a special attitude to herself, so they should not worry about her presence. They will soon become better, she did not doubt it. But then one of the guys suddenly spoke, saying that he had one important question. He heard that one of the soldiers would be chosen to protect Lady Fiona, even for just the evening. If he works hard, maybe they will choose it. Such a question surprised her. Her soldiers are experienced and professional. It is not surprising that newcomers look at them with admiration and dream of being in their place. She replied that everything was so. Of course, she is waiting for them, because they will become her defenders. After these words, the guys were noticeably nervous. Someone was even embarrassed, not knowing how to respond to such attention on her part. Fiona did not understand why Sigrin was looking at them so strangely. Having decided that there was enough from her, she looked away. Suddenly, her presence will scare the soldiers again. It was not surprising. Sigrin was more and more reminiscent of Abel. His expression, his gaze, his manner silently observe what was happening. 5 years have passed since the moment Fiona was in Halon. This meant only one thing. The moment was approaching when the original story would begin, which means that events would begin to develop rapidly. Now she turned 18, and Sigrin was 19. Time passed, and they both grew up, gradually approaching the fateful moments that will change their lives. Only a few months left before their next birthday. Sigrin over the years fulfilled the promise that he gave as a child, and now confidently moved to his goals. In the process of his growing up, he not only improved in fencing under the mentoring of the Duke of Abel, but also achieved a situation that allows him to freely enter and leave Halon. Now no one dared to look at Sigrin down. People were not only afraid of his strength, but also felt respect, realizing that he is not just a young man, but a person who is better not to contact. Fiona also did not stand still. She continued to work hard, striving for her main goal, a peaceful life. Thanks to the sale of units of monsters, she was able to earn enough money. Frankly, she no longer had to worry about money. It remained only to wait for the moment when Sigrin would meet the unis and make sure that their history develops, as was planned. If everything goes according to plan, she can finally enjoy a calm life. However, there was one person who threatened her ideal plan. The Duke turned to Fiona, recalling that she had to accept his proposal, and hinted that she should have thought about it more serious. Fiona replied that she was still thinking. This proposal could destroy her plan, and she did not want to rush with the decision. However, the Duke unexpectedly added that she should begin to call him a dad. Recently, Abel invited her to become his adopted daughter, but the girl immediately made it clear that she was not interested in such a development of events. The Duke only said that she still had to at least think about it, but Fiona was not going to change her intentions. She wanted to wait for Sigrin to marry, and then quietly leave and live a calm life. The Duke told Fiona that the power, wealth, and title that Halon possesses could belong to her. But, it seems, even if this happened, she would not care. She calmly replied that she really doesn't care what the Duke noted too. If he becomes her father, then she can get absolutely everything she wishes. However, Fiona only grimaced, saying that she was already bad from the same thought that the Duke of Halon could become her father, and this option did not suit her at all. The Duke grinned, calling her a ruthless girl. She grew up, became independent, but if the idea does not suit her, he is ready to forget about his proposal. Nevertheless, over these 5 years, much has changed. He added that he was sincerely grateful to Fiona, but she could not understand why he suddenly spoke about it. For a moment, it even occurred to her that perhaps the Duke is seriously ill. The Duke admitted that it was not easy for him to talk about it, so he asked her to simply be silent and listening. Since childhood, she got used to fighting monsters, but he is sure that Halon's pride is the only thing that could stop her. Now, the situation in Halon is stable. There are fewer monsters, and he has strong knights, such as Sigrin, and experienced soldiers who are ready to protect these lands. Therefore, if Fiona really wants to leave, he will not hold her. But she must understand that this choice is now completely in her hands. She is already an adult and can do whatever she wants. No one has the right to tell her, and she does not need someone's permission to decide how to live on. Thanks to its magical abilities, it can easily afford a luxurious life in the capital and enjoy the comfort that others can only dream of. And if she is bothering that she is a bastard, then let him know. He, as the Duke of Halon, is ready to defend her honor and name, if there is a need to ever this. If she accepts his proposal, then in the capital no one dares to treat her badly. But Fiona only grinned and admitted that she could not even imagine such a situation. The Duke did not immediately understand what she had in mind. Then Fiona clarified that, of course, her generosity touched her, but she does not believe that this act really deserves that. She added that he had already completely paid her for everything. They are calculated, and it makes no sense to offer her something more. In her opinion, this was quite enough. However, the Duke looked at her with obvious bewilderment. Does she think that he simply gave up a debt? It was a fair fee for her work, and this is not the same thing at all. Fiona was even a little confused. She did not think that Abel could be so generous. With a sigh, she apologized for considering him a cold and insensitive person. In response, he only silently handed her a letter. Then he said that he wanted her to take him because she came from her house. Fiona was surprised. The letter was indeed sent from the house of her family, Count Green. She involuntarily remembered the day when she was sent here without the right to choose. Her relatives, without hesitation, sent a child to the battlefield, without even thinking about what awaits her. They did not worry whether it will survive or not. For all these years, they have not sent her a single news, not a single word. And suddenly, a letter. It was strange, because she had long ceased to expect any news from them. The Duke shrugged and said that he did not know why it came right now. However, it does not seem that he generally trusted her family. However, he added that if she wishes, then he can destroy this house, because it was they who once condemned her to such a childhood. He has enough compromising evidence on them, and if Fiona only says the word, he will crush them like miserable insects. It seems that this is what the help of the Duke Abel looks like. But Fiona only shrugged and calmly replied that she was not so vindictive. Honestly, she does not care. The Duke grinned, noting that it really looks like her. In his place, possessing such power, he would destroy them all without leaving the slightest trace. Be that as it may, she was more worried about something else. She was sure that the original story would begin very soon, and then much would change. The main character will appear very soon, and if Fiona remains next to Sigrin, everything may not go according to plan. It could drive her crazy. Nevertheless, she expressed gratitude for the offer. The Duke, in response, invited her to call him a father if she wants to truly show her appreciation. However, Fiona did not even think about it, and immediately stated that this option was absolutely not suitable for her, so it's better not to even talk about it. Abel only snorted to this, calling her a truly cruel girl. But Fiona only laughed, not at all perceiving his words seriously. Today, he was especially grumbling, and it even amused her. She finally decided to see the letter that the Duke passed to her. However, as soon as she ran along the lines, she froze in complete shock. The letter contained a request to confirm her death. It said that her father, Count Green, is at death, and in this regard, they solve the issues of inheritance. They need a document confirming her death. It turns out that initially no one even hoped that it would survive. They have long crossed her out of their life. For them, she was just an obstacle, which was once sent to the faithful death, not wanting to recognize it as part of the family. They forgot about her for 5 years, but now they remembered only because of the inheritance. This proved that this family would never change. But she was not at all interested in the wealth of the Green, and even more so, she was not going to say goodbye to her father on his deathbed. However, it was strange that all this was happening precisely at the moment when Abel told her to live the way she wants. The family will be furious by learning that she is alive. While her name is still listed in Green's registers, if death is not confirmed, though it will come out, Fiona reflected on whether it was worth signing the rejection of the inheritance. Abel said that she could take revenge on the family, but it seemed senseless to her. She did not want to avenge what happened 5 years ago. She did not need to look for ways to avenge or harm these aristocrats. If she does not want to take risks and end up in prison, then the simplest and most peaceful option is to simply break all the connections with them. The best solution is to officially abandon the inheritance and become a stranger for them. However, for this, she will have to return home to personally sign all the documents. However, she was still about to walk around the capital, so this trip could be even by the way. Fiona once again weighed all the pros and cons, reflecting on her choice. At that moment, the door of her room opened, and Sigrin carefully looked inside, as if he were not sure whether it was worth going. He asked if she was here. Fiona turned her head to the door, and, shrugging her shoulders, said that he could enter. In order not to force him to wait, she even came up herself and opened the door in front of him. However, the guy stopped on the threshold, slowly going inside. Instead, he suggested that they talk right here, making it clear that he did not want to go further. She could not restrain the light sadness. Just a few years ago, they were so close that they could talk for hours while sitting on her bed. And now, between them, seemed to grow a wall. Recently, Sigrin behaved constrainedly, as if he felt awkward. Perhaps this is due to the fact that they are no longer children, but became adults, and their relationship has changed a bit. Finally, he decided to speak. He said that he had heard something from Abel, but before he could continue, Fiona corrected him. He must call him a teacher. Sigrin nodded and continued. The teacher said that Fiona could leave Halon, and he wanted to understand if it was true. The girl did not deny. This is really possible. Then Sigrin looked thoughtfully at her and asked where she was going to go. The letter said that her father was at death, so she should return to the capital. The Green family is a middle-class aristocrats who have their own mansion in the city. Sigrin was struck by the fact that she still calls her father a man who refused her so easily, although, to be honest, Fiona itself was unpleasant to call him that. The guy asked incredulously, "She is really going to spend time with his dying father, wait until he dies, and then just get back?" Fiona shook her head, saying that he misunderstood everything. She is not going to stay there, but after so many years in Halon, she would be interested to visit the capital at least once. Then Sigrin specified when she plans to return. However, Fiona hesitated, not knowing what to answer, because he completely misunderstood the meaning of her words. As a result, she directly said that she was not really going to return. She did not see the point in this, and has long made this decision for herself. The guy was literally numb from shock, and then, raising his voice, he began to demand an explanation, not believing that she was saying this seriously. But Fiona remained calm and firmly repeated that she was not going to return to Halon. However, Sigrin could not understand why she decided so. She explained that she simply had no reason to stay here. Over the past 5 years, they have really become close friends with him, and she has repeatedly defended him. But now, when the original story will begin soon, he will no longer need her help. However, Sigrin suddenly interrupted her, saying that they urgently needed to talk. Fiona finally admitted that she decided to leave, and that was the decision that she made. She was confident in her choice and is ready to move on, no matter what. The Duke, having heard her decision, could not understand why she came to this conclusion so quickly. Fiona, with a calm look, reminded him that she was an adult and is now making decisions. Sigrin, standing nearby, was furious. He did not restrain himself and began to call Abel, completely not hiding his discontent. Fiona could not restrain laughter, telling him that it was worth being careful with words. However, Sigrin was in complete horror that Fiona was about to leave, and did not know how to react to her words. He was dumbfounded, feeling that she could really leave him. He moved a little from this shock, forgetting everything that they experienced over the past 5 years. But Fiona thought he was just upset, and with a smile said that she would write to him. But Sigrin did not calm down. He again tried to explain to her that it is important for him, and that the decision is not so easy to make. She, in response, asked in bewilderment what he was talking about at all. Sigrin, obviously not knowing how to express his feelings, said that the whole problem consists in them, and he could not figure out what exactly does not give him rest in this decision. Fiona turned to him and quietly said that he would not continue. She added that she does not want to hear his words, that they will always be together, because it is no longer so. They are both for a long time not children. Despite the fact that they are connected by years of friendship, it was time to go in different ways. They are adults and should accept the inevitable parting. Sigrin clenched his fists, exhaled, and bitterly noticed that Fiona was behaving too heartily. But she only grinned and said that he should turn on logic and not dramatize. He frowned and asked if she plans to stay in the capital forever. There was a tension in his voice, as if he was hoping that she would say no. But Fiona was not sure. She would like to first go to some warm place where you can just relax and not think about what awaits her further. Now Sigrin understood her desire. but his expression became too gloomy, and Fiona, noticing this, grinned, asking him not to look at her so sadly. They had matured for a long time, and it was time to understand Sigrin that they could not always be near. Apparently, he really believed that he would always be with her, but Fiona understood his reaction. Her trip to the capital was disturbed by him because there lived people who hated him and wanted his death. For Sigrin, the capital is not just a place, but the homeland, from where it was once expelled. Returning there meant to encounter the past again. Fiona gently reminded him that he should not be sad. He still has a lot of trials ahead, and he is stronger than he thinks. In any case, according to the plot, he will still be in the capital. And Fiona confidently said that he would always be on his side, wherever he was. Fiona said with a slight smile that if he someday needs her help, he could just call, and she will come at any time. But Sigrin suddenly asked what would happen if he asks her to stay. This did everything much more complicated. If he continues to hold on to Halon, then the plot that should develop will remain in place, and the original story simply cannot continue. Fiona confidently stated that this would not happen. Then Sigrin frowned, noticing that she was contrary to herself. First she promises to help, and then he says that he would not remain with him, but in another place. He asked where exactly she wants to go, because she understands how important it is to have a reliable friend nearby, who would always support at a difficult moment, and not just at a distance. In Sigrin's voice, something strange sounded when he asked the next question. What does she think about him? Fiona looked at him, realizing that this conversation was becoming more serious than she expected. However, she did not think for a long time. Calmly, without hesitation, the girl replied that for her, he is the most important person in this world. It was true, but the words sounded too simple. Hearing this, Sigrin thought, and then clarified, what would she do if he decided to leave for some other place? Would you leave it or do it differently? Fiona shrugged and said that she would have wished him good luck and just said goodbye to him. After all, if he leaves, then he has the reasons for that, and her task is to respect his choice. But she also added that if he ever needed help, she, as promised, will come. Without unnecessary questions, without hesitation, it will simply come and do what is needed. Sigrin looked at her in complete shock. He could not believe that she said so easily. He exhaled softly, grinned, and admitted that it was foolish to ask her about it. Fiona decided to change the subject and said that she was a little frozen. She was going to look for something warm, possibly a cloak or blanket to warm herself. Remembering that the maid was erasing the blankets and left them somewhere here, she looked around, hoping to quickly find at least something suitable before leaving the room. However, she did not know the exact place where they were put. Her gaze rushed around the room, but nothing suitable caught her eye, which began to annoy a little. At this time, Sigrin simply stood still and silently looked at her. Something strange was read in his gaze, a mixture of longing, sadness, and some kind of inner struggle. And before Fiona managed to say something, he came closer and suddenly hugged her from the back. The movement was unexpected, but there was no sharpness in it, only warm. She froze, surprised by his act. It was strange to feel his hands so close, as if he wanted to keep her, preventing him from leaving. She felt in a trap but did not resist. Sigrin looked at her with a serious gaze and said that if she still decides to leave Halon, then at least she should remain in the capital. If you think about it, there is nothing surprising. In the end, everything has always been like this. Wherever she ends, he will certainly find a way to come for her. Be it danger or just her departure, he could not allow her to disappear from his life. Of course, it could not be otherwise. Sigrin has always been so, stubborn, devoted, ready to follow her, even if it meant quit everything that he has. He has repeatedly said that if Fiona leaves, he will try to come to her. He always made such promises, assuring that he would not allow them to leave for real. So now he asked her to wait for him in the capital. It was important for him to know that when he arrives, she would be there, and not disappear without a trace. There was not a drop of doubt in this. He knew that he would come, and all he wanted, so that she would not go too far, and waited for him in the place where he can find her. Fiona was surprised at such a promise, but deep down, she expected something like that from him. Sigrin never changed, always spoke as if his words were a law. After a couple of months, she already finally moved to the capital. Together with the servants, she unpacked her few luggage, preparing for a new life. In fact, she had few things, just a small bag and a roll. She has never been a person attached to objects and did not like to accumulate excess. Abel, watching her departure, noticed that many came to say goodbye to her. But there was no Sigrin among them. Its absence seemed especially tangible. Fiona only smiled, hearing his words, and said that all due to the fact that he was really upset because of her departure. Then the Duke asked if he said something else. She nodded and calmly replied that Sigrin promised to come for her. And if the main character does what he did not do before, it can be a very disturbing omen. The Duke grinned and noted that this was the whole of Sigrin. In parting, he gave her a letter and something important that, in his opinion, could be useful to her. Abel handed over to Fiona a letter of recommendation, which could be useful to her in the future. If she suddenly decides to linger in the capital, this document will allow her to live in the Halon mansion. The girl carefully looked at the letter and could not hold back a slight smile. She already has enough money for the first time, but the offer was generous. However, the Duke doubted that this was their last meeting. When Fiona was already sitting in the carriage, she stopped for a moment and turned to him. With a slight bow, she sincerely thanked him for everything that he had done for her. The Duke, hearing her words, only smiled. He seemed to be pleased with this farewell. Even now, when she left, he looked calm and satisfied. As soon as Fiona got into the carriage, the servants also began to say goodbye. The maids came closer and said that they would miss the mistress, because over the years they managed to get attached to her. They also asked her to visit her sometimes if she had the opportunity. After all, Halon's house is always open to her, and they would like to see her again. At that moment, the girl noticed that Abel was saying something. His voice was quiet, and she did not immediately make out the words, but they felt something important. He seemed to be interested in whether they would see himself someday. There was neither sorrow nor regret in his voice, but the very fact that he asked made her think. Fiona sighed heavily and leaned back, settling comfortably in a carriage. All these farewells tired her a little, but apparently, so be it. She suddenly felt fatigue. A new life was waiting for her ahead, and while the carriage moved smoothly, she thought that it would be nice to relax a bit. Jane perfectly understood that his father's condition is critical. Doctors in the hospital reported that there was almost no chance of recovery, and the family needs to prepare for the worst outcome. Despite this, deep down, there was a tiny hope that his father would come to his senses. But the reality was ruthless. Every day, his condition only worsened, and no one could change it. The most alarming was that the deterioration of the condition began immediately after the father made a will. This could not be a coincidence, and Jane could not throw this thought out of his head. Now, according to all the laws, the eldest son had to decide the fate of the inheritance. He, as a legitimate firstborn and heir to the family, had to take all responsibility. The eldest son of Count Green, Kindle, did not doubt his right. He firmly decided that he would become the head of the family and did not allow the thought that someone could challenge his right. Jane, having listened to his confident words, only grinned wryly. Then, turning to his brother, he coldly noticed that Kindle really knows how to convince, but not his. He thought about, is there really a law by which only the eldest son can inherit the title? Or does the Force decide everything, especially in the family of magicians, where power belongs to the most powerful? Jane was the youngest son of Count Green. Their family has always been famous for outstanding magicians, and, of course, the title of the chapter was to get the one who owns the most powerful magic. Kindle grinned. His eyes flashed with cold contempt. Does Jane dare to claim that he is stronger than his own brother? What a stupid conceit. According to Kindle, this should not even be discussed. He looked demandingly at Jane and offered him right now to demonstrate his abilities in order to dispel all doubts. From his point of view, the younger brother at best could reinforce a tiny bonfire. He had no idea about real difficulties, and Kindle was sure that he was not worthy to stay in the house. All this conversation was heard by their mother. But even after its appearance, the brothers did not stop. Kindle said that it was Jane to disgrace their family of magicians, which means that he is the one who should leave. The woman entered the room with a tired but severe look. Her voice was calm, but full of hidden anger. If their dispute becomes known outside the house, this will make a shame on the whole family. As soon as the brothers saw the mother, they tensed. They did not know how much she heard, but it was clear that her patience was running out. She talked about how Jane treats her brother. Jane, not embarrassed, said that even with all this, he was still better than a worthless first-born who would only destroy their family. His voice was full of contempt. The words of his son shocked a woman. A spark of rage flickered in her eyes. This was enough. She was not going to let them continue this meaningless dispute. She firmly stated that she would solve the issue with the inheritance. Therefore, they must stop enmity, because its decision will be final, and it makes no sense to argue with it. But Jane burned the last bridge. He looked at his mother with a cold mockery and said that he did not trust her words. Even if she is their mother, she has no right to decide the fate of the inheritance. Mother froze, not believing her ears. But Jane already said he wanted. He knew that everyone in this house was well aware of her secret love ties, and now it was voiced aloud. The Countess still could not understand how Fiona dared to give this boy so much money. She was worried that their family condition could eventually go to him. This was unacceptable to her. Kindle calmly said that no one cares about her connections, but if the rumors scatter in noble circles, the honor of the family will be in jeopardy. He hinted that Mother should be careful. Suddenly, the doors swung open, and the servants entered. The woman froze, expecting to hear bad news. The expression of their faces showed that something serious happened. The servants bowed and reported that an unexpected guest had arrived. Now the orders of the mistress and her sons were required. The Countess frowned, anticipating something was amiss. Her voice trembled when she asked exactly who granted them. The servant was clearly nervous, not knowing how best to give this news, but it was impossible to be silent. He gathered in spirit and pronounced the name, Lady Fiona Green. The one who left the house and went to Halon 5 years ago returned. There was tense silence in the room. No one could believe what he heard. It was impossible. They have long written off her from accounts. Return after so many years? How could this happen at all? The idea that she was alive brought everyone horrified. Many immediately decided that it was an impostor. The child could not survive in such terrible conditions. At that time, she was only 13, and the northern field of battle is not a place for a child. In addition, everyone knew that she did not even own the weakest magic. Everyone perfectly remembered the story of Fiona Green. The Count once brought her to this house, but no one saw her values. Bastard, sent to the attic, did not bother anyone. The girl, whom his own family sent to faithful death, considering this only a way to fulfill the order of the king, no one even tried to protect. And now none of them feels guilty for this. The woman who stood in the hall, without even looking at her, told the servants to drive her away with contempt. She was sure that she faces nothing more than an impostor who does not deserve attention. But before anyone managed to do something, Fiona herself entered the room. She calmly but firmly noticed that such a technique from the family was, to put it mildly, rudeness. One of the servants tried to block her path, recalling that she could not simply enter without an invitation. Fiona replied with a smile that this was really difficult, but she coped. When everyone finally looked at her more carefully, there was a tense silence in the hall. They could not help but admit that this girl really resembles the Duke with her gaze and manners. Of course, they wanted to believe that this is a lie. But to complete your long journey and return here to put an end to the past, it was an important goal for Fiona. She calmly stated that she received an official confirmation of her death, that she was sent. So the issue of its existence clearly needs to be clarified. It seems that these people hate personal meetings, preferring to solve everything through letters. They thought they could get rid of it with several lines on paper, but, oddly enough, Fiona prefers to talk to face. Therefore, she is here, and she does not want to leave at all until everything that is needed is said. So many years have passed since their last meeting, but can it be called a warm family reunion? Their reception was far from the welcoming, but Fiona was not surprised. Fiona really felt happy. realizing that there was no change in their family. Everything remained the way she remembered. The same habits, the same atmosphere, the same views. This gave her a sense of stability, which she had so missed recently. Then, remembering those moments, she just smiled and assured that she was saying sincerely. This was true. There was no lie in her words. She did not need to pretend, because she really was relieved. Lying in bed, she felt strange, as if the reality around has changed, but she could not understand what was not so. The dream did not go, and thoughts were confused, forcing her to think about what awaits her further. If you look at the situation differently, then these are not the walls of the Duke of Halon surround her. This is the house of her own father, Count Green. Although she almost forgot what it was, to be here, the feeling was too alien. Now she was allocated a worthy room, which undoubtedly surprised. Unlike previous times, when she had to endure inconvenience, now she was finally able to sleep well. Although it was strange, but nice. If they, as before, decided to settle her in the attic, she would definitely not have said nothing. I would have raised a noise, would make them regret such a decision. Their faces yesterday, full of bewilderment, were funny. She enjoyed this moment. Fiona noticed that these people seemed to argue among themselves before making a decision. Probably their dispute was fierce, but it even entertained it. She did not feel anger or regret, only a light grin. She hated that she was drawn into it all. It would be much easier to just abandon the inheritance, sign the papers, and leave tomorrow. Life outside of all this would be much calmer, without all these unnecessary experiences. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by the maid, who appeared at the door. She politely reported that she brought water for washing. Fiona looked up, looking in surprise at her. She did not even have to ask about it. She allowed to enter, and still perplexed, thanked the maid for care. It was unexpected, but nice. It seems to be a trifle, but after everything that she had to endure, even such attention seemed something new. However, as soon as she reached for the water, she noticed that the maid put the capacity too roughly, and part of the water spilled out. Fiona frowned. The maids in Halon's house never made such mistakes, she thought. Why so? It was unusual, even annoyed. Everything was different in the Duke's house. Every detail, every servant gesture, everything was subordinated to strict order, and there were no such oversights. She frowned stronger when she noticed that Kuvshin himself looked dirty. And water. Something was wrong with her. The smell made her grimacing. Where did such a disgusting liquid come from? She carefully brought the jug to her and immediately realized, this is the water that was used to wash rags. Fiona felt irritation rises in her. What was this sign from the servants? They really decided to do it. They gave her to wash themselves with dirty water, which was usually used for washing rags. It was not just disrespect, but frank humiliation. Fiona looked at the jug in disgust. How can you be so stupid and vile? She could not understand. After all, even if they did not love her, it was still worth maintaining at least some decency. But, it seems, it did not worry them, and they decided to show their true attitude. Despite everything, she still remained a member of this family. She spent 5 years on the battlefield, survived terrible times, and after all this, they dare to treat her like this? It was not just insulting, but humiliating. The maid, standing in front of her, did not even try to hide emotions. She just covered her face with her hand, but Fiona clearly saw that she laughs right in her face. Openly, without the slightest attempt to restrain himself. This voice. This face. Fiona frowned, carefully looking at her. She definitely saw her before. Somewhere. Once. The memory was vague, but she knew that she had already met this maid. She took a deep breath, trying to figure out her thoughts, and suddenly everything fell into place. Certainly, she saw her 5 years ago. This could not be a coincidence. Too much converged. It was the same maid that once mockingly told her, "The longer you look at her, the more obvious its origin becomes." Then these words stuck in the memory of the Fiona, and now echoed in the head. She remembered. This girl was the maid of honor of the Countess. And she always treated Fiona as terrible, only because she was illegitimate. Competition in her gaze, then, it seems, has not disappeared anywhere now. So this is why she was given this room. This was not a kindness or accidental decision. All this was part of something more, some plan that was built in advance. They conspired from the very beginning. This meant that her family always saw in her only worthless bastard. They never changed their opinion, but it seems that they were mistaken in some ways. They think that she is just an illegitimate child who was lucky to be born with noble blood half. There is neither power, no money, nor a real house, and its position is too shaky to seriously perceive it as a threat. If such an attitude towards her continues, her desire to take revenge will flare up with renewed vigor. After all, if you imagine that Fiona was forced to endure such a whole life, then she will not be able to leave it unanswered. Therefore, without hiding curiosity, she turned to the maid and asked her name. She, without hesitation, called her pride with obvious pride, as if she wanted to prove something. But Fiona frowned. Her face seemed familiar to her. She already saw her before. The maid, noticing this, suddenly smiled, as if in her gaze, an understanding was read, which Fiona did not share. In addition, this maid looked in her eyes. It was unusual, because in noble families, the servant was not supposed to behave so impudently. They must look down, showing respect. Even her behavior was too free, as if she did not take Fiona at all seriously. Perhaps she was confident in the favor of the Countess. Therefore she behaved like that, reflecting her attitude. Fiona always knew that the Countess hates her. Now, when it came to inheritance, this hatred probably has become even stronger. She is ready to go to everything, just to leave her with nothing. Perhaps the Countess will take absolutely everything, without leaving Bastard not a penny. Now, not only she is worried, but the whole family of Green, because the issue of the inheritance has become a real headache for them. However, the reaction of Fiona was too calm, even boring. The maid could not believe that this stupid girl does not understand how she was humiliated. She clearly expected another reaction from her. Therefore, she decided to say everything straight. The Countess wants her, humiliated and plaintively roaring, to be thrown out of the house. Let him understand that she has not the slightest chance to stay here. Fiona Green? In the best case, she is just a naive girl who probably hopes that now, having returned, she will be able to become part of the family again. But this will not happen. For them, she is nothing. Bastard, unworthy of attention. For this maid, she is only a way to earn the confidence of the Countess. And if it is possible to show that there is no place in this house, then her own position will only be stronger. Fiona looked at the maid and calmly stated that she perfectly understood her idea. It became clear to her that the maid decided to play her little game, but was mistaken in the calculations. The mistress was not as naive as it might seem. However, May did not even tremble. Only with a laugh and obvious contempt, she asked what the mistress was talking about. Her voice sounded defiantly, as if she was confident in her rightness and was not afraid of possible consequences. Fiona slowly closed her eyes, as if trying to hide her emotions. No one could say what she was thinking at that moment, but her pose and her tense expression made the maid to think, how much is she going to cry? However, in the soul of Fiona was not at all going to indulge in weakness. She did not even want to admit the idea that she still continues to consider herself an aristocrat, who was once. But the situation made her play this role. She continued to pretend to be crushed and ready to burst into tears at any time. Trembling lips, lowered gaze, all said that she was worried. But in fact, it was only a distracting maneuver. And suddenly, sharply, before the maid managed to understand what was happening, her palm hit May with all her strength. The loud sound of a slap in the room was heard in the room, breaking the tense silence. The blow was so unexpected that the maid froze in place. She stood, not believing in what was happening, looking widely opened at Fiona. She certainly could not predict this. It was outside her understanding. After all, in front of her was Fiona, the same girl who was always flexible, who was afraid to argue all her life, because she knew that she would be locked in the attic. And now, she gave her a slap in the face. Fiona calmly recalled that she had already said yesterday she was really glad that her family had not changed. But the maid sharply cried out, losing her self-control, and with anger asked what she allows herself. However, Fiona did not answer right away. She looked directly into the maid's eyes, and calmly, even with some mockery, asked, "Do you even understand what exactly you were mistaken in?" It was strange. There was no anger in her voice, in her eyes, not a drop of resentment. On the contrary, Fiona smiled. She smiled as if this very moment gave her true pleasure. May was perplexed, watching the servant who was literally choking with fear. Her hands trembled. Her gaze rushed around the room, as if she was looking for ways to escape. But what could have scared her so much? Suddenly, the maid exploded. Her face sagged with anger. She almost cried out that Fiona should be afraid of her, and not vice versa. In her voice was not only rage, but also some kind of desperate attempt to maintain power. She immediately stated that she would immediately go to the Countess. It seemed that the thought of this gave her confidence. In her tone, a threat sounded. Apparently, she believed that the hostess would certainly stand up for her, but Fiona did not even let her finish. Her hand again shot into the air, and another blow fell on the maid's face. This outbreak of determination was too unexpected to make it possible to react. Fiona made it clear that she was asking a question, and now the maid is simply obliged to answer. Her voice sounded firmly, and her gaze burned through. Something was clearly wrong with her, and the maid was supposed to explain it. May felt completely lost. She did not know what to do, what to say, or to which side to stand. Everything that was happening went beyond the usual conflict. The situation became more tense. The maid looked like she was experiencing the worst nightmare in her life. She did not understand how the lady could behave so cruelly, and from this, she became even worse. What is this person in front of her? Fiona ordered her not to hesitate and immediately answer what exactly her mistake was. There was no patience in her voice, only exactingness. She wanted to hear the truth and was not going to hesitate. If the maid does not give her a worthy answer, then Fiona will gladly tell her what is customary to do in Halon's house. There, with the guilty maids, they did not stand on ceremony, and perhaps it was worth reminding him of this. In Halon, for ridicule of the owners of the servant, they could cut off his tongue. The punishment was cruel but effective. Fiona thought what methods are used in the capital. Surely not so harsh, but still hard enough. She looked at the maid and thought, if she was stubbornly silent, perhaps she should apply Halon methods. Fiona knew that this was just a thought, but still she was interested in how the girl reacted. As soon as she talked about this out loud, May immediately turned pale, began to tremble, and, unable to restrain his emotions, burst into tears. She hastily began to ask for forgiveness, and Fiona, crossing her arms over her chest, asked who she was. Through the tears, the maid replied that she was Lady Fiona, the daughter of Count Green. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly, as if hoping that the correct answer would help her avoid punishment. Fiona nodded, as if evaluating what she heard, and asked another question. What exactly should the maid do? But May, having lost her answer, began to repeat that she would no longer behave so arrogantly and begged to forgive her. Finally, Fiona said that now she could go. Her gaze was cold, but the tone is even. The maid froze, comprehending this, and apparently decided that the hostess finally calmed down and released her. However, as soon as she stepped back, the thought of it changed. She had to hurry and tell the Countess about everything. If she has time to warn her first, she may receive protection. The Countess will undoubtedly not leave it unattended. She will definitely take revenge on her, and then Fiona will have to regret what she did. May was sure of this. As soon as she made an attempt to escape, Fiona turned to her and with a grin asked where she was in a hurry. The maid shuddered and froze, realizing that it would not be possible to leave so easy. Fiona calmly reminded her that first of all, the maid should take care of this basin with dirty water. After all, it was with this that it all began, so let him correct his own mistakes. Then, looking directly into the maid's frightened eyes, she added that she should remember, if she dares again to do something like that, the punishment will be much more serious. The next time, she can't get rid of a simple fright. Fiona hoped that May understood everything. She did not want to arrange a performance from this, but it was necessary to show that she could not be treated as a servant would please. However, the last thing the maid expected was the next moment. Fiona grabbed the pelvis and, without blinking an eye, poured dirty water directly on it. The horror that covered May was genuine. Fiona felt anger flashing inside. She remembered how Sigrin once said that she was very easy to infuriate, and now she realized that he was right. These people knew how to press sore points. Sigrin, as it turned out, was really not mistaken. It seemed to her that she was able to control herself, but it was worth facing a similar attitude, and her patience began to crack at the seams. She always thought she was quite calm, but seemed to overestimate herself. Everything could have been different if she had not had to constantly face a similar attitude. They themselves provoke her. These people have not changed at all. All the same cold views, still the same arrogance. They are still terrible, and from the realization of this, her irritation only intensified. Why should she tolerate it at all? Suddenly, she felt the presence behind her and turned around. There stood Countess Green, looking at her with suspicion. Her voice was poisonous when she asked what Fiona was doing here. Fiona raised her chin a little. In the end, she is in her own house. Is this a crime to walk where she once lived? She has nothing to make excuses for this woman. But the Countess did not let up. She slowly bowed her head to one side, as if looking at something funny, and asked if she really considered this a place for her house. A mockery was heard in her voice. The Countess noted that Fiona is still looking at everything through pink glasses, as if living in an illusion. Her words were full of poison, but Fiona was not going to swallow it. Inside, everything boiled. The desire to hit her grew with every second. But the Countess did not stop, she continued, throwing that Fiona should get rid of her illusions and fail. She is no longer a miserable rat, clinging to the remains. Fiona always considered herself educated and educated. She knew how to restrain emotions when it was needed. But even she had a limit of patience, especially when she was insulted in the face. Perhaps she should remain calm. But if you think about it, does she owe someone to someone? Number. If these people are so confident in themselves, then let them be convinced that she will not silently demolish their antics. The Countess herself began this dispute. He herself pulled her into all this, so now Fiona believed that she would be enough. She was no longer going to play her games and endure her manipulations. Everything that was said did not matter. If you need to fight, then you need to fight. That was the principle of Halon. He did not recognize the cowardly shoots, and Fiona understood that sometimes the best way out was to go forward, not hiding. But now she was not sure if it was worth it. However, if she decides to openly oppose the Countess, this will mean that she will have to linger here longer than she wanted. And she still has so many things, so many decisions that need to be made. Everything needs to be considered. Having weighed everything, Fiona decided to leave it. Do not cling to the past if the decision has already been made. She knew what she wanted, and the Countess no longer had power over her. The past was left behind, and she no longer looked around. But unexpectedly for herself, she turned to the Countess and thanked her. These words were said calmly, without ridicule, but with obvious hardness. The Countess could not understand what the catch was, and looked at her with suspicion. The woman was perplexed what was being discussed, but Fiona explained. Thanks to everything that the Countess did, she finally realized what she really wanted. And this is not revenge, not anger, but an opportunity to do something truly important. The Countess looked at her with undisguised contempt. She gritted her lips and, frowning, asked what exactly was talking about. Dissatisfaction sounded in her voice, as if she understood that she could not control the situation. Fiona looked at her calmly and firmly said that she did not want to have any connections with her or her family Green. It was her final choice. She refused to be part of this world, which has oppressed it for so long. She knew that she was doing the right thing. She will officially abandon the inheritance and demand changes to the Green family register. From now on, she will have a different name, another life. Everything that associated her with this place will remain in the past. The Countess's maid received an order. In her sudden movements, it was read that she already knew what the hostess would do. Fiona saw this and understood that the Countess is not going to just let her leave without consequences. Looking right at the Countess, she stated that she would not take a dime from them. Neither inheritance, nor gifts, nor the slightest benefit. She does not need anything from them. This money never belonged to her, and she will not allow them to become her chains. Therefore, the Countess has nothing to worry about. But if someone tries to take possession of what belongs to her by right, she will not allow this. Let her not need an inheritance, but this does not mean that someone else can use it. Fiona hoped that greed would break them from the inside. Let them feel what others experienced because of them. If she leaves, they will begin to fight among themselves for what remains, and it will be the best revenge for her. The Countess did not understand whether Fiona laughs sincerely or is it just her way to hide her real feelings. Only when a person loses everything does he realize how little he really had and plunges into despair. Fiona directly said that she would leave everything and leave. She did not want to cling to the past or get involved in the games of her family. Her decision was final, and she was not going to refuse him. On the same day, she sat down for a letter. It was short, without unnecessary words. Just a requested request, no extra warmth or friendliness. She wrote not as a friend, but as a person who needs to solve the issue. The letter said that the money to the mansion, which the Duke mentioned earlier, she wants to get immediately. She did not ask, but rather notified, making it clear that she had already decided everything. Abel received a letter earlier than expected. He did not even think that Fiona would accept it so quickly. Her determination was amazing, but at the same time, there was nothing unexpected in this. She always acted decisively. He knew that Fiona had a weak place. Each person has him. She just thoroughly hid her, not allowing anyone to get to him. But he felt that even she had something that makes her doubt. Honestly, he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. And yet, when he finally came, he had a strange feeling. Not relief, not joy. Something else that he could not explain exactly. Fiona Green has been strange since childhood. She always behaved softly, cute, as if she was the kindest child. Everyone around was used to this image, but he knew that something else was hiding behind him. Because sometimes it became completely different, cold, hard, detached. At such moments, it was impossible to understand her. It seemed that in front of you are two different people who exist in the same body. All this time she defended Halon. He thought that it became important for her, that she began to cherish these lands. Perhaps she was even used to this place so much that she no longer saw herself outside him. But as soon as she told her to leave, she did it without the slightest hesitation. Neither disputes nor attempts to prove something. Just once. And she disappeared, as if everything that was did not matter to her. And from this, he became a little sad. He himself did not even expect to feel it. It would seem that he knew that it would be so, but there was still some strange, viscous feeling inside. Therefore, it is not surprising that for Sigrin, this has become a real shock. He could not just accept it. For him, it was too abruptly, too unexpected, and he did not know how to deal with it. After all, Fiona defended Halon for 5 years, guarded him as if herself. And now she just left, as if nothing meant. As if everything that was a mistake. And it was difficult to put up with this. Fiona heard different rumors, and some of them touched her herself. People said that she may be in love with Sigrin. It was funny because even she left him in this place, not looking back. Thus, with her act, she seemed to say to everyone, her work here is over. She did everything she could, and now she did not see the point of linger or look back at the past. From childhood, Fiona tried to stay away from this society. She was not interested in his orders and relationships between people. She always lived as if she did not care. But even if she wanted to understand their rules, to find out the cause of the actions of others, it would be too difficult. Some things were simply inexplicable, which means that it was not worth spending time on them. Suddenly, a knock came outside the door. Abel raised his head, immediately guessing who it could be. He was not mistaken. Sigrin stood outside the door. The Duke allowed him to enter, not even surprised. Fiona noticed that Sigrin was a little late. Not to say that it was something important, but she always noticed such details. Perhaps this was a habit that remained since those times when it relied on observations than words. Sigrin calmly said that he arrived at once, as he was called, although he himself did not understand why he was called. The Duke only grinned, asking why he would not get used to behaving and further. He just said this with the kind, as if he would also like to complain. It seemed a little hurt that Fiona did not mention him a word in her letter, but Sigrin only calmly remarked that from the very beginning, he did not expect anything else. He never had any special illusions, so such things could not upset him. In addition, now it did not matter. Everything was decided, and he goes to her. The rest did not matter, because he had a much more important path ahead. The Duke did not mind. All he could do is observe how the guy makes his own decisions. In the end, no one could make him change his opinion. However, Abel could not help remind him that his relationship with the imperial family was left to be desired. Moreover, they knew perfectly well who he was and who could become. He remembered how he told him this a few years ago, and now he simply repeated his words. Sigrin did not deny, he only nodded, confirming that everything was just like that. Then the Duke asked him the question. What would he feel if he was officially recognized as a prince? It was not just an idle conversation, but something much more serious. But the guy did not answer. His silence said more than any words. Abel noticed this and only nodded, as if understanding what he was thinking about. The whole thing was that Sigrin hesitated for a long time, between a thirst for revenge, the desire to live, and the desire for peace. But recently, he finally made a decision for himself. However, if he wants to return to the capital, he needs to achieve something significant. Without a good reason, his return would be useless and even dangerous. He is only a mediocre, associated with an imperial family, but his position may change. If Halon stands behind him, then even those who do not notice him now will begin to see strength and influence in him. Everything will change if he achieves recognition, something so significant that the capital cannot ignore this. He must take a step that will declare him as Prince Sigrin, a man worthy of heritage. For example, the story of how he defeated the leader of the monsters and saved many people on the barren lands of Halon. A legend that can change the opinion of others and make his name known everywhere. If he is ready, the Duke will arrange an ideal scene for him, prepare the conditions where he can prove himself. Everything will be organized so that this step becomes his triumph and not the next failure. If he really wants to become a prince again, return to his city and find his place, he must survive. And not just to survive, to become a hero, at least once in a life to prove his value. Fiona decided to write a letter to Abel. She was going to inform him that she agreed to take the money that he was ready to allocate to the mansion. In the end, she could not do without these means. However, as a condition, he demanded that when the work was completed, she went to inspect Halon's mansion instead of him. It seemed a strange, but not so complicated requirement. It is good that he did not demand something more crazy, for example, so that she call him a father. That's what Fiona would definitely not be able to come to terms with. She would definitely not have accepted such a deal. Although Abel liked her, this did not change the essence. In the book, he was her enemy, and his behavior could not make her think differently. He is the same person who did not inspire confidence, but now, in reality, he spoke completely different. He claimed that he wanted her to become his daughter. It sounded too absurd, too unrealistic to just believe it. When it all ends, she really will need a vacation. So many things fell that she did not even realize how much she was tired. If only to finish the matter as soon as possible. However, now the moment has come when everything was supposed to go as a turn. The story that she knew should finally turn around, because the time of the approach of Abel and Sigrin to the capital is already close. According to the plot, Sigrin was supposed to kill the Northern Dam Dragon, after which his name would be famous. He will become a hero, and then he will return to the capital, where he will be met with honors. The imperial family, succumbing to the influence of public opinion, recognizes him as a prince because his feat will become too significant to ignore him, and soon the main character will appear on the stage, Eunice. Fiona was curious to see how all this would happen. She was even captured by this anticipation, although she realized that so far, she was left only to wait and observe. After all, Sigrin always depended on her. Fiona could not help but worry about how the story would continue to develop when everything went beyond her previous knowledge. Sigrin always remained himself. He was a man who knew how to use the weaknesses of others in his favor. And now, Fiona should not think about him, but about how to play the weaknesses of his family. After all, it is possible that the Greens will begin their fraud as soon as they feel a threat. All their condition was built on dirty money, on the trade in opium, and she knew it very well. In the Empire, any mention of opium meant big trouble. This was prohibited by law, and for such cases they punished cruelly, without hesitation. If it is proved that the Green family is at least somehow involved in this, all their property, all the wealth acquired by dishonestly, will be immediately confiscated, without the ability to return them back. And those who directly participated in these dirty transactions were waiting for a severe punishment. And of course, the members of the Green family will be punished primarily because their fault will be irrefutable. However, Fiona began to notice that Jane and the Count's wife seemed to not even know that their family is connected with something like that. They lived in their world, not knowing what was behind their luxury. It made her think, what to do now? Well, she should aggravate the situation, knowing that some family members are innocent, or to use this chance in their interests. In the end, why not try to press them against the wall? Since fate threw such an opportunity to her, it was necessary to figure out how to squeeze the maximum benefit from this. When Jane saw Fiona, his face expressed a genuine shock. He clearly did not expect her appearance, and completely did not understand what she was doing here and why she came. Fiona calmly looked at her brother, and, without losing confidence, said that she had something important that he should know about. After all, it was he who was the heir to the family. The guy frowned. He was not going to listen to her moralizing, and directly stated that she had no right to intervene in family affairs that did not concern her. However, she only continued to look at him with a hard look. It was important for her to say this, because it was he who would inherit the title, which means that it is he who will have to answer for everything that happens in their family. The guy was a little surprised to hear her words. He did not expect Fiona to talk about it so directly, without any hesitation. It seemed that she had no doubt that it was the magical power that should determine who would become the heir. Fiona firmly stated that the Green family has always been known as the family of magicians, and therefore it is logical that the strongest should be at the head. She spoke calmly, but she felt confidence in her voice. For her, it was an obvious fact. But reality was different. Kindle became the heir only because he was born first. Not because of strength, not because of the mind, but simply because of seniority. If everything was decided differently, would he even have the right to this place? In addition, Jane had serious problems. As the Duke Halon said, he was in his ears in debt. The fault of his recklessness and weakness before gambling, he lost more than he could afford. And now, when the amount became truly huge, he was ready to do everything, just to get a family condition. Only money could save him from the disaster, and for the sake of them, he was ready to cross any boundaries. Although the truth was that the debt was already paid. Before leaving Halon, someone took up this question and settled it. But this remained a secret. No one knew who exactly solved the Jane's problem and why. Fiona confidently stated that he must agree with her words. The guy thought, but did not find mistakes in them. She told the truth, and it was obvious. It is unfair that the family closes its eyes to the weakness of the heir. Kindle was not talented. The whole situation looked ridiculous. How could a person without the ability to become a head? But now there were enough problems without it. In addition, perhaps he did not even know that he had long inherited the title. Fiona suddenly looked at him seriously and reported that she had found something in his room. Her voice sounded wary, and the guy immediately realized that we were talking about something important, perhaps even dangerous. She asked if he knew what it was. The guy looked at the subject in her hands and reluctantly answered. It was an opium. Simple but disturbing truth. This morning, the servants found him in the air. It was an unexpected find that instantly changed a lot in their understanding of the situation. And now the sister was forced to say aloud that everyone suspected, but did not dare to voice. The heir to their family was dependent on opium. Now that she said this out loud, it has become obvious. If she has such important information, it will now be much easier to solve the problem. Perhaps, without her words, the situation would drag on. But now everything is in her hands. However, the guy was in no hurry to rejoice. He immediately asked who exactly found opium in this room. It was an important point, and he could not miss him. He needed to know who to trust. Fiona calmly replied that she was ready to tell everything she knew. But before that, she had one condition. She could not just put the information, she needed to ask for something in return. If he inherits the title, then she wants him to correct her status. This was the only chance to change her situation. She was not going to miss such an opportunity and retreat back. He was clearly surprised by her words. So much so that he even asked for whether he understood it correctly. It seemed strange to him that she suddenly started talking about this right now, at such a moment. He added that she perfectly understands that this can harm herself. Such a requirement could not but have consequences, and he could not help but warn her about it. But Fiona only firmly replied that she returned here for the sake of this. Everyone mistakenly believes that she wants to steal a family condition, but this is not at all. Her goals were completely different. She just wanted to see her family again. But instead, she was in the position of bastard, whom everyone condemns. Even those whom she considered relatives now did not understand her, and she was tired of it. Moreover, her presence only creates unnecessary inconvenience for the family. She felt it at every step, and this was only more painful. Its existence has become a problem for everyone. After everything that happened, Fiona did not find a better way out, except to cry. Fortunately, she was a talented actress, and her tears looked completely sincere. She knew when and how to play the necessary emotions. Through the sobs, she said that her heart was breaking in pain, because she loves her family with all her soul. No matter how hard she cannot just forget about them. True sadness sounded in her voice. These words acted. The guy carefully looked at her and firmly stated that he realized her. If he someday becomes the head of the family, he will help her find freedom. This promise sounded seriously for him. Fiona was delighted, although she did not fully realize what exactly he had in mind. After all, she was already sent on the battlefield. Wasn't that their decision? Then why is he talking about freedom now? All this was confused. Then he suddenly asked the question, what was the name of the servant who found opium in the room of the older brother? Fiona smiled barely noticeably, because this whole story with the found opium from the very beginning was a lie. In fact, it was she who organized all this herself. Having bribed several servants, she asked them to allow her to inspect Kindle's room. Everything was supposed to look like someone accidentally discovered a prohibited substance. One of those whom she bribed, at her direction, told Jane that he allegedly accidentally stumbled upon opium during cleaning. Everything was adjusted so competently that no one could doubt the reliability of what happened. As a result, they became involuntary witnesses of her cunning game. Now everyone was sure that Lady Fiona revealed the truth by accident. She simply continued to observe what was happening without interfering. She was interested in watching how events were developing. The intervention would now be superfluous, so she decided only to observe. Everything went exactly as she suggested, which means that her plan has not yet given failures. Kindle could not restrain himself and raged his brother, saying that he had no right to power. He was too quick-tempered, and this only proved his weakness in the eyes of others. Jane screamed in response that a person with such insignificant abilities as Kindle had no chance. He has no place in management, and he will not even allow him to think about it. Their dispute became more fierce. They screamed at each other again, and this was no longer surprising. These two always argued, so their skirmish looked quite familiar. Fiona expected something like that, and it even amused her. As she expected, tension in their conversation only grew. Everything reached such a point that the Count's wife simply stopped appearing nearby. She was tired of these endless clarifications of relations. While Jane continued to spread rumors, exaggerating Kindle's guilt, they scattered at an incredible speed. People who heard his words believed in every word, which instantly influenced the reputation of the Candela. Relatives began to doubt the values of Candela, which exacerbated his position. His name was tarnished, and now they wondered whether it was worth continuing to support him in the family. In the end, despite attempts to justify himself, Kindel was expelled from the family. He was connected and simply deported, leaving him no chance of returning. It was a cruel and final decision, so this stormy family war ended, in which there were no winners. The whole severity of the conflict fell on the shoulders of Candela, while others seemed to calmly continue their life. Now her moment has come. Fiona knew that her turn had come, and she was ready to act. It was its decisive part of the game, and she was not going to concede, no matter how difficult. In her hands were important documents that reveal the illegal trade of the family, green. She decided to send them to the imperial palace, where they could play a decisive role in her fate. Now everything depended on her move. In the game of Jenga, which she played with fate, she was going to completely destroy the wooden tower. There was no way back. Her decision will change everything around. Fiona recently received one letter from the Duke, but now, to her surprise, something else has come. She could not understand why he writes so often, not giving time to answer. All this began to nervous. In a new letter, the Duke asked if she finished her work. His words sounded as if he were waiting for the end of her work from the very beginning. This annoyed her, since she could not understand his impatience. From such a question, Fiona got angry. She did not understand whether he thinks that it is so easy to destroy someone's family. This was not just a matter or decision, it concerned a whole life and many destinies. Today, unexpectedly for everyone, the financial department of the Empire received an anonymous letter. This letter was full of accusations against the Green family, accusing them of illegal entrepreneurial activity. Fiona immediately realized that the matter was serious. If the accusations in the letter are true, all the property of the Green family will be confiscated. These consequences seemed terrible, and Fiona felt her fear over the future. Everything depended on what would happen next. Green's family was quite influential, and her wealth was rather big. The imperial palace could decide that this was a great opportunity to replenish the treasury. All these dangers have now threatened not only to her, but the whole family. 2 days later, Fiona turned to Jane, congratulating him on the new status of the head of the family. It was an important point, although Fiona perfectly understood that despite his position, all responsibility lies on his shoulders. Jane restrainedly noticed that this status was only temporary. In his words, there was neither joy nor satisfaction. He was too focused on current problems to perceive it as an achievement. She answered him that, despite everything, now there really is no one who could take his place. No one could be on top, except for him, although she knew that in fact this situation was burdensome. Jane confirmed her words, agreeing that, in the end, it was. He accepted the documents that she prepared and began to be ready to sign them. It was a step forward, but the situation remained tense. She took out the documents that she spoke about earlier and invited him to put a seal. This was the last step to complete the registration, and if everything is done correctly, the process will finally end. Jane took the documents and set his seal without hesitation. He did not experience either pride or joy. It was simply the necessary action in the conditions in which they found themselves. Everything went according to plan. "Aye, and now you can get out," he said, tiredly leaning back into the chair. He needed to focus on work because there were so many things that he barely managed to control everything. She just completed an important matter. Yes, the work really looked like a mountain of tasks. Jane was surrounded by a pile of papers and affairs that required attention. But all this was the result of his new situation, and he understood that this was not the end. However, Fiona said that she has something that she wants to tell him. Her words were full of tension, because what she was going to say could be a surprise for him and even shock. She noticed that she had not received an answer from him to her question about his game addiction. This question was important to her, and she had long wanted him to recognize his problem. But her words made him be nervous. In addition, he had a duty that she knew about. This was not a secret for her, and she was not going to hide it. Her directness made him feel uncomfortable. He did not expect her to speak about it. Jane was dumbfounded. He did not understand how she found out about his problems. He always thought that he was hiding it from everyone, and his anxiety about this became stronger when she uttered these words. Fiona only shook her head, saying goodbye to him. She was no longer going to waste time on empty conversations, and her decision was made. She left the room, leaving him alone with thoughts and duties. When she had already left, he screamed, but she did not pay attention. She just walked in her way as if nothing had happened, with a slight step, as if all this did not touch her. She did not think that she would be so good. In the corridor, she met with the Countess, who stood with her maid and screamed at her with questions about why she was still here. She is shameless and should not even think about using her brother, and it is better for her to just disappear.